The gallows stood stark against the gray winter sky of Redemption Springs, a crude wooden structure that seemed to hunch like a predator at the edge of the town square. A crowd had gathered despite the bitter cold, their breath forming ghostly plumes in the frigid Wyoming air. Men in heavy coats, women with shawls pulled tight, and even children brought by parents who believed witnessing justice served would instill a proper respect for law and order. Ethan Morgan watched from the edge of the crowd, his weathered face impassive beneath the brim of his hat. At 45, the years had carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth, evidence of a life lived hard in an unforgiving land. His tall frame remained straight despite the weight of the memories he carried, and the dark wool coat he wore did little to ward off the chill that had settled in his bones long before this Wyoming winter. The condemned man, barely more than a boy, trembled as the noose was placed around his neck. Sheriff Maxwell read the charges in a voice that carried across the hushed square. Horse theft, a hanging offense in Wyoming territory. Ethan's jaw tightened. The punishment seemed excessive for stealing a single mare, especially when starvation had driven the act. But frontier justice was rarely tempered by mercy, and he had learned long ago that his opinion meant little in such matters. "Any last words?" Sheriff Maxwell asked, almost bored. The boy's lips moved, but whatever he said was lost. As the crowd began to cheer, the executioner placed a hand on the lever. Ethan turned away. He'd seen enough death to last several lifetimes, from the battlefields of the Civil War to the harsh realities of the frontier. One more would add nothing but another ghost to haunt his dreams. As he made his way from the square, a movement caught his eye. A small figure huddled against the rear wall of the mercantile that bordered the square. A child, a little girl no more than 10 years old, stood facing the rough wooden boards. Her thin shoulders shook beneath a dress too flimsy for the bitter December cold. No coat, no gloves, and Ethan noticed with a jolt, no shoes. Her bare feet were purple against the snow-crusted ground. Behind him, the trapdoor of the gallows dropped with a sickening crack, followed by a roar from the crowd, but Ethan barely registered it as he approached the girl, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "You all right, child?" he asked, his deep voice gentled. The girl flinched but didn't turn, remaining perfectly still, except for the violent trembling of her small frame. "I can't help but notice you're freezing out here. Where are your shoes?" He knelt down, bringing himself to her level, though still keeping a respectful distance. Slowly, the girl half-turned, revealing a pinched face with remarkable blue eyes that reminded him of summer skies, a stark contrast to her current surroundings. Those eyes held a weariness beyond her years, scanning him quickly before dropping to the ground. "I can't go home until I bring back money," she whispered, her voice thin and raspy from cold. Only then did Ethan notice the small tin box clutched in her reddened fingers, its metal surface dented and worn. "How long have you been standing here?" The girl shrugged one bony shoulder. "Since morning bells." Morning bells had rung at dawn over 6 hours earlier. Ethan felt something stir inside him, an emotion he'd worked hard to bury after Rebecca's death. His sister's face flashed in his mind, young, hopeful, determined to find him in Wyoming, only to disappear somewhere along the treacherous journey west. "What's your name?" he asked. Another hesitation. "Sarah." "Sarah," he repeated. "I'm Ethan Morgan. I own the Triple M ranch outside town." He shrugged off his heavy coat, holding it toward her. "Take this before you freeze." She stared at the coat, as if it might bite her. "Miss Cordelia will be mad if I take charity." "Miss Cordelia?" "My guardian," she said. "She says I have to learn to earn my keep." The last word came out as a violent shiver. Ethan didn't wait for permission. He draped the coat around her thin shoulders, startled by how it swallowed her small frame entirely. "Where do you live, Sarah? I'll take you home." "The Red Garter," she said, naming the saloon at the edge of town, a place known for more than just its whiskey. Ethan's expression darkened. No child should be living in such an establishment. And Miss Cordelia is your guardian there? Sarah nodded, finally turning to face him fully. In the movement, her dress shifted, revealing angry red marks on her ankles and calves, the distinct pattern of a switch or riding crop. Ethan's blood ran cold. Sarah, has someone been hurting you? Her eyes widened with fear. I have to go. I have to find money. She clutched the tin box tighter. She won't let me in until it's full. How about I help you with that? Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out several silver dollars, and placed them in her tin. The coins made a hollow sound as they hit the empty metal. There, now you can go inside. Sarah stared at the coins in disbelief, then back at Ethan, confusion evident on her face. Why would you help me? The question struck him like a physical blow. What kind of life had this child lived where simple kindness was incomprehensible? Because no child should stand barefoot in the snow, he said simply. Now, let's get you somewhere warm. He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Sarah placed her small, ice-cold fingers in his palm. The Red Garter stood at the edge of town, its garishly painted facade a stark contrast to the dignified storefronts of Redemption Springs' main street. Even in daylight, music spilled from its doors, accompanied by raucous laughter. Ethan had never set foot in the place. The memories of war had left him with little taste for revelry, but he knew its reputation well enough. As they approached, Sarah's steps grew increasingly reluctant. She stopped altogether at the side entrance, a plain door that stood in stark contrast to the establishment's ornate front. She might be busy, Sarah whispered. When she's busy, it's best to wait. I'd like to meet this Miss Cordelia, Ethan said firmly. A child shouldn't be sent out without proper clothing, especially in this weather. He knocked firmly on the door. After a long moment, it swung open to reveal a woman in her 40s. Her face was heavily painted, auburn hair piled elaborately atop her head. She wore a silk dressing gown that might once have been elegant, but now showed signs of wear at the cuffs and collar. We're not open until, she began, then stopped abruptly when she saw Sarah. Her painted lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. Sarah, darling, I see you've brought a customer. Her gaze raked over Ethan, assessing his worth in a single glance. No, ma'am, Ethan said coldly. I found your ward standing barefoot in the snow outside the mercantile. She says she wasn't allowed home until she brought money. Cordelia Blackwood's smile didn't falter, though something dangerous flashed in her eyes. Sarah has such an imagination. She's always making up stories for sympathy. She reached out, pulling the girl roughly through the doorway. Thank you for bringing her home, Mr. Morgan. Ethan Morgan. Recognition flickered across Cordelia's features. The rancher, I've heard of you. She placed a possessive hand on Sarah's shoulder. Sarah is my sister's orphan. I took her in out of the goodness of my heart, but she needs discipline. Children need to learn the value of hard work. Hard work doesn't include freezing to death, Ethan countered. She needs proper clothing, shoes. I'm quite capable of raising my niece, Mr. Morgan, Cordelia cut in, her voice hardening. Not all of us have the luxury of your resources. Behind her, Ethan caught a glimpse of a narrow hallway. At its end, a heavy door stood slightly ajar, revealing a set of steps leading down into darkness. From that darkness came a sound that made his blood run cold, the muffled whimper of a child. Cordelia noticed his gaze and quickly stepped sideways, blocking his view. If there's nothing else, Mr. Morgan, we have preparations to make before opening. Sarah looked up at Ethan, a silent plea in her eyes as she slipped his coat from her shoulders and held it out to him with trembling hands. Keep it, he said. It's too cold for that dress. That's very generous, Cordelia said with a tight smile, taking the coat from Sarah and draping it over her own arm. We appreciate your concern, but we manage just fine. The dismissal was clear. Without legal grounds to intervene, Ethan had no choice but to leave. But as the door closed, he caught one last glimpse of Sarah's face. Pale, resigned, and filled with a quiet desperation that would haunt him long after he'd left town. Marshal James Cooper looked up from his desk when Ethan entered the small jailhouse, surprise evident on his weathered face. The two men had served together in the Union Army, fought side by side at Antietam. But since settling in Wyoming territory, Ethan had become something of a recluse. "Morgan," Cooper greeted him, setting aside the papers he'd been reviewing. "Been a while. What brings you into town on hanging day? Didn't think that was your kind of entertainment." "It's not," Ethan replied, removing his hat. "Jim, what do you know about a woman named Cordelia Blackwood? Runs the Red Garter?" Cooper's expression darkened. "Bad business, that one. Why do you ask?" Ethan explained his encounter with Sarah, watching his old friend's face grow increasingly grim. "Not the first time I've heard similar stories," Cooper said when Ethan finished. "Problem is, without proof of actual abuse, my hands are tied. Judge Carter owns half this town, including that saloon property. He and Cordelia have an arrangement. An arrangement that involves children begging in freezing weather?" Cooper sighed, leaning forward in his chair. "Listen, Ethan. Things aren't as simple as they were during the war. Here, money talks louder than morals. Carter's been bringing in workers for the mines and railroad, mostly immigrants, women, and orphans. They arrive desperate, work for almost nothing, and no one asks questions when some disappear. And the law just looks the other way?" Ethan's voice hardened. "I am the law," Cooper reminded him. "One man with a badge in a town where the judge, the banker, and most of the business owners are in Carter's pocket. I do what I can, but push too hard and they'll replace me with someone who doesn't ask questions at all." "So, a child suffers while we debate politics. I didn't say I approve," Cooper snapped. "Just explaining the reality." He paused, studying his old friend. "Why this child, Ethan? You've been holed up at Triple M for years, barely setting foot in town. What makes her different?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. How could he explain that something in Sarah's eyes had awakened memories of Rebecca? That the girl's quiet dignity in the face of suffering had pierced the armor he'd built around his heart? "She reminds me of Rebecca," he finally admitted. "Same age when she left to find me. Same determination." Cooper's expression softened. "Ethan, what happened to Rebecca wasn't your fault. The attack on that wagon train." "I should have gone to meet her," Ethan cut in, the old guilt rising like bile. "Instead, I sent money for the stagecoach and expected her to make it alone." "You couldn't have known." Ethan stared out the small window at the snow-covered street. "Her last letter said she was determined to reach Wyoming to find me, said she'd take any route available." He turned back to Cooper. "What if she made it further than we thought? What if she reached Wyoming before she died?" Cooper frowned. "The report said the entire party was lost in the Indian attack." "Reports can be wrong." Ethan paused, gathering his thoughts. "Jim, I need to know more about Cordelia Blackwood and Judge Carter. Something's not right at that saloon." Cooper hesitated, then nodded. "I'll see what I can find out. But Ethan, be careful. Carter isn't someone you want as an enemy." As Ethan turned to leave, Cooper called after him. "Why come to me after all this time? You could have just ridden back to your ranch, forgotten the whole thing." Ethan paused at the door, Rebecca's final words echoing in his mind. "Protect those who can't protect themselves, Ethan. Promise me." A promise he'd failed to keep for too long. "Some debts can't be ignored forever," he said quietly, and stepped out into the gathering storm. The blizzard hit without warning, transforming Redemption Springs into a ghostly landscape of howling wind and swirling snow. Ethan had intended to return to his ranch, but found himself trapped in town as the storm made the trails impassable. He took a room at the modest boarding house run by Eleanor Simmons, a stern widow known for her excellent coffee and strict prohibition of drinking and gambling on her premises. As night fell and the storm intensified, Ethan found himself unable to sleep, his mind returning to Sarah. Had Cordelia actually let her inside? Was she warm? Safe? He paced the small room, feeling as trapped by his thoughts as by the weather. A soft knock at his door startled him. Opening it, he found Eleanor Simmons, her gray hair neatly tucked beneath a nightcap. holding a steaming mug. "Thought you might need this," she said, extending the coffee. "A storm like this brings back memories for those who've seen battle." Ethan accepted the mug with a nod of thanks. He hadn't realized his restlessness was so obvious. "Ghosts keeping you up, Mr. Morgan?" she asked perceptively. "Something like that," he admitted. Eleanor studied him with shrewd eyes. "Marshal Cooper mentioned you were asking about Cordelia Blackwood." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." "It's a small town," she replied, then lowered her voice. "That woman is poison, Mr. Morgan. Those orphans she takes in. They're not all related to her, despite what she claims." "You know about this?" Eleanor's face hardened. "My daughter worked at the Red Garter, not by choice. We fell on hard times after my husband died. Judge Carter promised her legitimate work at his household. Instead, he delivered her to Cordelia." She swallowed hard. "She died in a mine collapse 2 years ago, 17 years old." "The mines? I thought she worked at the saloon." "Cordelia supplies more than drinks and companionship," Eleanor said bitterly. "She provides workers for Carter's businesses, young ones who don't question dangerous conditions or missing wages." "And no one stops this?" Eleanor gave him a weary look. "People have tried. They disappear or suddenly find themselves facing trumped-up charges. Carter owns the law in this town, Mr. Morgan." "Not all of it," Ethan said, thinking of Cooper. "And not forever." Eleanor studied him carefully. "What's your interest in all this? You've kept to yourself since settling here." Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I found a girl today, barefoot in the snow. Sarah. She said Cordelia wouldn't let her inside without money." Recognition flickered across Eleanor's features. "Small thing? Blue eyes? Blonde hair?" Ethan nodded. "She comes to my back door sometimes. I give her bread when I can." Eleanor's voice softened. "She never asks for anything, just stands there until I notice her." "Reminds me of someone you lost?" Ethan finished quietly. Eleanor nodded, her eyes distant. Then she refocused on Ethan. "If you're planning something, be careful. Carter has eyes everywhere." After she left, Ethan stood at the window, watching the snow obliterate the town. Something Eleanor had said tugged at his memory, about Sarah reminding her of someone. The same feeling had struck him earlier. There was something familiar about the girl, something he couldn't quite place. His contemplation was interrupted by a soft thud against his door, so faint he almost missed it beneath the howl of the wind. He opened the door cautiously, half expecting to find Eleanor returned. Instead, a small figure huddled on the floor, shivering violently, snow melting from her clothes onto the wooden boards. Sarah. Her blue lips and frost-whitened face told of a dangerous journey through the blizzard. She clutched his coat, the one he'd given her earlier, wrapped tightly around her thin frame. "Sarah!" He quickly gathered her up, bringing her inside and placing her near the stove. "What happened? How did you find me?" Miss Eleanor," she managed through chattering teeth, "said you were here." Ethan wrapped his blanket around her, rubbing her arms gently. "You shouldn't be out in this storm. It's dangerous." Sarah nodded, her eyes huge in her pale face. "Had to show you." With trembling fingers, she reached into the pocket of his coat and withdrew a folded piece of paper, a page torn from a diary, the edges yellowed with age. "It's from my mama's journal. Miss Cordelia doesn't know I have it." Ethan unfolded the paper carefully. The handwriting was delicate but rushed. June 12, 1868. The conditions in the mine worsened daily. 3 men died yesterday when the south shaft collapsed, but Carter ordered it concealed. He says if word reaches the territorial governor, the operation will be shut down. I fear what will happen when I can no longer work. My pregnancy advances and soon it will be impossible to hide. Carter's threats are clear. No one must know the child is his. I must find Ethan Morgan. Rebecca said he would help us if anything happened to her. Ethan read the passage twice, his hands growing cold despite the heat of the stove. "Sarah," he asked carefully, Who was your mother? Mary Collins, she whispered. She died when I was 4, in the mine accident, the big one. Ethan's mind raced. Mary Collins. The name meant nothing to him, but she had clearly known his sister, and Rebecca had apparently told this woman that Ethan would help her. Did you know my Aunt Rebecca? Sarah asked, watching his face with unnerving intensity. Ethan's heart stuttered. Your aunt? Sarah nodded solemnly. Mama said Aunt Rebecca died trying to reach you. She was my mama's sister. She said to find you if anything happened. But then the mine collapsed, and Miss Cordelia said I belonged to her because Mama owed her money. The room seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. Rebecca had a sister? Why had she never mentioned Mary in her letters? And if Mary was Rebecca's sister, then Sarah was. You're my niece, he whispered, the realization like a physical blow. Sarah's eyes filled with hope. That's what Mama said. She said you were my uncle and would protect me. But Miss Cordelia said you didn't want me, that you knew about me and didn't care. Anger surged through Ethan, hot and cleansing. That's a lie, he said firmly. I never knew about you, Sarah. If I had, I would have come for you immediately. Sarah studied him, caution warring with desperate hope in her expression. Miss Cordelia said I can't trust anyone, that everyone wants something. I want you safe, Ethan said simply. I want to keep the promise I made to your Aunt Rebecca before she left to find me, to protect those who can't protect themselves. Outside, the storm raged, rattling the windows, but inside, something long frozen in Ethan began to thaw as Sarah tentatively leaned against him, her small body gradually relaxing as exhaustion overcame fear. You can't go back there, he said softly. Sarah looked up, fear flashing across her features. Miss Cordelia will be angry. She'll punish the others. Others? Sarah nodded. In the cellar. 5 of us. Miss Cordelia says we're all worthless. But if we work hard enough, maybe someone will want us someday. Ethan's jaw tightened. No one is worthless, Sarah. And you're not going back there. Not ever. As Sarah drifted into an exhausted sleep, Ethan gently tucked the blanket around her and moved to the window. The storm showed no signs of abating, but a different kind of tempest was brewing within him. For 15 years he'd buried himself in his ranch, letting guilt consume him while the world continued its brutal course. No more. Rebecca was gone, but her niece, his niece, was here, alive, and in desperate need of protection. Somewhere in this town, other children suffered as she had, and powerful men like Judge Carter believed themselves untouchable. He thought of Cooper's warning about making enemies. Too late for that. The moment Sarah had shown him that diary page, the battle lines had been drawn. Carter, Cordelia, and whoever else profited from their enterprise would soon learn what many had discovered during the war. Ethan Morgan was a dangerous man to cross. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside his room, too heavy to be Eleanor's light step. Ethan moved silently to the door, drawing the Colt revolver he kept in his belt. Years on the frontier had taught him to sleep armed and ready. The doorknob turned slowly. Testing. Locked. Then, a folded piece of paper slid beneath the door. Ethan waited, counting heartbeats, before retrieving it. The message was simple, written in a firm hand. They know she's gone. They're coming for her, and for you. Be ready. Cooper. Ethan slipped the note into his pocket and checked his ammunition. 4 bullets in the Colt, a rifle with 20 rounds in his saddlebag downstairs. Enough to start a war, but not enough to win one. Not against men like Carter who could summon forces from across the territory. Sarah stirred in her sleep, mumbling something that might have been Mama before settling again. Looking at her, Ethan made his decision. They couldn't stay in town. Too dangerous. Too exposed. They needed to reach Triple M Ranch, where he had men loyal to him, supplies, and defensible ground. But first, he needed to know exactly what they were facing. Quietly, he moved to the window and peered out through a gap in the curtains. The storm had reduced visibility to almost nothing, but he could make out shadowy figures moving through the swirling snow toward the boarding house. At least 5 men, possibly more, hidden by the blizzard. Ethan reached for his boots. No time for subtlety now. They would have to risk the storm, find Cooper if possible, and make for the ranch before Carter's men closed in completely. As he gently shook Sarah awake, a shot rang out, shattering the window and sending glass spraying across the room. Sarah screamed as Ethan pulled her to the floor, shielding her with his body. "Hold tight to me," he instructed, his voice calm despite the danger. "We're leaving. Now!" Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with terror, but her small jaw set with determination. In that moment, she looked so much like Rebecca that Ethan's heart ached. "Uncle Ethan," she whispered, using the title for the first time. "I'm scared." "I know," he replied, checking the hallway, "but I won't let them take you. Not ever again." Outside, voices called his name, demanding he surrender the girl. Judge Carter's men had arrived, and the real battle was about to begin. The back door of Eleanor Simmons's boarding house opened silently onto an alley choked with snow. Ethan pressed a finger to his lips, signaling Sarah to remain quiet as they slipped into the frigid night. The blizzard had intensified, a roaring wall of white that swallowed shapes and sounds alike. A blessing in disguise, as it would help conceal their escape. Sarah clung to Ethan's hand, her small fingers lost in his calloused grip. He'd wrapped her in layers, his coat, a woolen blanket from Eleanor's linen closet, and a pair of boots the widow had thrust into his hands before ushering them toward the rear exit. "Head for Dr. Levy's place," Eleanor had whispered urgently. "2 blocks east, blue door. He'll help you." They stumbled through knee-deep drifts, the wind cutting like knives through their clothing. Behind them, shouts echoed from the boarding house, Carter's men discovering their empty room. Ethan quickened their pace, half-dragging Sarah through the snow. The girl struggled valiantly to keep up, but her legs were too short for the deep drifts. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped her into his arms. "Hold tight," he murmured against her ear. Sarah nodded, burying her face in his shoulder as he forged ahead. Dr. Abraham Levy's small practice occupied the ground floor of a modest 2-story building at the eastern edge of town. Unlike most of Redemption Springs' establishments, no light burned in the windows, a fact that made Ethan hesitate as they approached the blue door Eleanor had described. He set Sarah down in the shelter of the doorway and knocked. 3 sharp raps followed by 2 softer ones. The signal Cooper had taught him years ago, a remnant of their wartime code. Silence answered. Ethan knocked again, more urgently. The storm was worsening, and Sarah had begun to shiver violently despite the layers. Finally, a thin shaft of light appeared beneath the door. "Who comes in the storm?" a heavily accented voice demanded. "A friend of Cooper's," Ethan replied, "with a child in need of shelter." The door cracked open, revealing a narrow face with intelligent eyes beneath a skullcap. Abraham Levy studied them suspiciously before his gaze fell on Sarah. His expression immediately softened. "Inside, quickly," he urged, opening the door wider, "before you both freeze." The doctor's quarters were modest, but warm, heated by a pot-bellied stove that radiated blessed heat. Sarah gravitated toward it immediately, holding out her small hands to the warmth. While Ethan explained their situation, Dr. Levy listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grim. When Ethan mentioned Judge Carter's involvement, the doctor spat on the floor. "That man," he said with quiet venom, "has corrupted this town since the day he arrived. I've treated too many broken bodies from his mines, too many women and children damaged by his enterprise." He turned to Sarah, his manner gentle. "Let me look at you, child. Are you hurt?" Sarah hesitated, looking to Ethan for permission. At his nod, she reluctantly removed the layers, revealing her thin dress and the marks Ethan had glimpsed earlier. Angry welts across her legs and arms, some fresh, others scarred over. "Cordelia's discipline," she whispered, her eyes downcast. Dr. Levy's hands trembled slightly as he examined her, his professional demeanor strained by barely contained anger. "Some of these are infected," he noted, reaching for his medical bag. And you're malnourished. When did you last eat a proper meal? Sarah shrugged, unable to remember. While the doctor tended to her wounds, Ethan moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. The street remained deserted, the storm having driven even Carter's men to seek shelter. But dawn would bring clearer skies and renewed pursuit. We need to reach my ranch, Ethan said. It's defensible, and I have men there who'll stand with us. Dr. Levy nodded, applying a salve to Sarah's worst welts. The storm may be your ally there. It's cut off all the roads. By morning, the passes will be blocked with snow. Even Carter's men won't be able to follow immediately. They'll come eventually, Ethan replied grimly. And they'll bring numbers. Then you must be ready. Dr. Levy finished bandaging Sarah's wounds and helped her redress. The child needs food and rest before any journey, and so do you, Mr. Morgan. While they ate a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit from the doctor's pantry, Cooper arrived, snow crusting his coat and hat. His grim expression told Ethan everything he needed to know even before the marshal spoke. Carter's offering $500 for the girl's return, Cooper said without preamble. Claims you've kidnapped his ward. She's my niece, Ethan replied, the words still strange on his tongue. Cooper's eyebrows rose. You sure about that? In response, Ethan handed him the diary page Sarah had brought. Cooper read it slowly, his weathered face betraying nothing until he reached the end. Rebecca had a sister? He finally asked. Apparently. A Mary Collins. Cooper's expression darkened. Collins. I remember that name. She died in the big mine collapse of '69, one of dozens. Carter covered it up, Dr. Levy interjected. I was there when they brought out the bodies. Terrible injuries consistent with unsafe conditions. I reported my findings to the territorial authorities, but nothing came of it. His bitter laugh held no humor. Carter had already paid them off. Sarah, who had been quietly eating her bread, looked up at the mention of her mother. Mama knew the mine was dangerous, she said softly. She wrote it all down. Everything about Judge Carter and the bad things he did. All three men turned to her. You have more of your mother's diary? Ethan asked gently. Sarah nodded, reaching into the pocket of her dress. She withdrew a small leather pouch, worn and cracked with age. Mama sewed this inside my doll before she died. Miss Cordelia took the doll, but I got this out first. Inside the pouch was a folded piece of paper, not diary pages as Ethan had expected, but a marriage certificate. It documented the union of one Mary Collins and a William Carter in St. Louis, dated 1867. Judge Carter was married to your mother? Ethan asked, stunned. Sarah shook her head. Mama said he already had a wife in St. Louis. He brought her and other ladies west with promises of work, but it was all lies. Her young voice held a weariness no child should know. When Mama found out about his real wife, he put her in the mine. Said she had to work off her debt for the train ticket. Cooper swore under his breath. Marriage fraud to lure women west. I've heard of such schemes, but never could prove anything. It gets worse, Dr. Levy said, examining the document. Look at the date. If they were married in 1867 and Sarah is 10 now. The implication hung heavy in the room. Sarah had been born in 1865, 2 years before the fraudulent marriage. You're Carter's daughter, Ethan said quietly, his flesh and blood. Sarah's face crumpled. Mama said never to tell. Said he'd kill me if he knew. That's why she wanted to find you, because Aunt Rebecca said you were honorable. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Not only was Sarah his niece through Rebecca's sister, but she was also the illegitimate daughter of the most powerful and corrupt man in the territory. This changes everything, Cooper said, his voice tight. If word gets out that Carter has a bastard child by a woman he later worked to death in his mines, his reputation would be ruined, Dr. Levy finished. No wonder Cordelia kept such a close watch on the girl. Ethan's mind raced. The documents gave them leverage, but also made their situation infinitely more dangerous. Carter wouldn't just want Sarah returned now. He'd want any evidence of his past buried permanently. We need to leave, he decided. Tonight. Storm or no storm. Cooper nodded grimly. I'll arrange a wagon. The livery owner owes me a favor. And I'll prepare supplies, Dr. Levy added. Food, medicine, blankets. The journey to Triple M will be treacherous in this weather. As the men made preparations, Sarah remained by the stove, clutching her mother's marriage certificate. Her small face was set in lines of determination that reminded Ethan painfully of Rebecca. Uncle Ethan, she said quietly when he knelt beside her, are the other children still in danger? The ones at Miss Cordelia's? The question caught him off guard. Despite everything she'd endured, her first thought was for those she'd left behind. Yes, he answered honestly, but we'll come back for them. I promise. Sarah studied him with those unnervingly direct blue eyes. Mama said promises matter, that they're sacred. She was right, Ethan said solemnly, and I mean to keep this one. Sarah nodded once, satisfied. Then, with the practicality of a child who had learned early to focus on survival, she asked, When do we leave? The journey to Triple M Ranch normally took 3 hours by horseback in good weather. In the blinding snowstorm, with a wagon moving at a crawl, Ethan estimated it would take most of the night. Cooper had arranged an enclosed wagon with heavy canvas sides, typically used for transporting goods, but now serving as their shelter against the relentless wind and snow. Dr. Levy had insisted on accompanying them, arguing that Sarah's condition required medical attention. The elderly doctor now sat beside the girl in the wagon bed, both wrapped in every blanket Eleanor Simmons had been able to spare. Ethan drove the team, his hands numb with cold, despite heavy gloves. Cooper rode alongside, rifle across his lap, constantly scanning their back trail, though visibility remained near zero in the howling blizzard. No one could follow in this, Cooper shouted above the wind after they'd traveled for nearly 2 hours. Even Carter isn't fool enough to send men out in a Wyoming blizzard. Ethan wasn't so sure. A man like Carter, with his wealth and influence, could compel desperate men to attempt desperate things. But he nodded in agreement, unwilling to voice his fears and add to Sarah's burden. The trail crossed open range before entering a narrow pass between 2 ridges, the only direct route through the foothills surrounding Ethan's property. In summer, the pass offered stunning views of the distant mountains. In winter, especially during a storm, it became a death trap of wind-driven snow and treacherous ice. As they approached the pass, the storm intensified, as if nature itself sought to bar their way. The horses struggled forward, heads lowered against the onslaught, their breaths forming instant ice in their manes. "We should turn back," Dr. Levy called from the wagon bed. "The child cannot withstand much more of this cold." Ethan glanced back at Sarah, her face barely visible beneath layers of blankets. Her eyes met his, steady despite her obvious exhaustion and discomfort. "I can make it," she said, her voice small but determined. "I'm stronger than I look." Pride swelled in Ethan's chest at her courage. "Just a little farther," he promised. "Once we're through the pass, it's less than an hour to the ranch." The narrow trail through the pass forced them to proceed single file, Ethan driving the wagon, Cooper following close behind. The wind funneled between the ridges with increased fury, driving snow and ice into their faces with such force that even speaking became impossible. They moved in grim silence, each focused solely on survival. Halfway through the pass, disaster struck. A deafening crack split the air as a massive pine, its roots weakened by the storm, toppled across the trail directly in front of them. The horses reared in panic, nearly overturning the wagon before Ethan managed to bring them under control. "We'll have to clear it!" he shouted to Cooper, securing the reins and reaching for the axe strapped to the wagon's side. Cooper dismounted, tying his horse to the back of the wagon before joining Ethan at the fallen tree. The trunk was massive, nearly 3 feet thick, a daunting obstacle even with proper tools and good conditions. As they began the arduous task of clearing a path, Dr. Levy emerged from the wagon to assist, leaving Sarah wrapped in blankets inside. The 3 men worked in desperate silence, aware that every moment in the open increased their risk of frostbite or worse. The sharp crack of a rifle shot froze them in place. "That's far enough, Morgan," a voice called from behind them. Ethan turned slowly, his hand instinctively moving toward his holstered Colt. Through the swirling snow, he made out 3 mounted figures at the pass entrance. The leader, a tall man with a distinctive eye patch, held a rifle aimed squarely at Ethan's chest. "Jackson!" Cooper growled, recognizing one of Sheriff Maxwell's former deputies. "Marshal Cooper," Jackson acknowledged with mocking formality. "Interesting company you're keeping these days. Judge Carter was most disappointed to hear of your divided loyalties." "Carter has no authority over federal marshals," Cooper replied, his hand hovering near his own weapon. Jackson smiled coldly. "Perhaps not, but he does have authority over his own ward. Hand over the girl, and perhaps we can overlook your involvement in this kidnapping." "She's not Carter's ward," Ethan said, his voice deadly quiet. "She's my niece, and she's under my protection." "A touching sentiment," Jackson sneered. "But Judge Carter has legal documents proving otherwise. Now step away from the wagon." The standoff stretched, taut as a bowstring. 3 against 3, except Dr. Levy was no fighter, and Sarah was a child. The odds favored Jackson and his men, especially with the advantage of their elevated position at the pass entrance. Ethan's mind raced. Fighting here, in the open, with Sarah so vulnerable, was too risky. But surrendering her to Jackson meant returning her to abuse and exploitation. Or worse, if Carter had discovered her true parentage. "Uncle Ethan?" Sarah's small voice came from the wagon. She had pushed aside the canvas flap, her pale face peering out at the confrontation. Jackson's expression changed when he saw her, a flicker of recognition followed by calculation. "There you are, little one. The judge has been worried sick. Time to come home." Sarah shrank back, terror evident in her eyes. "I don't want to go back. Please, Uncle Ethan, don't let them take me." The naked fear in her voice hardened Ethan's resolve. He took a deliberate step toward the wagon, placing himself between Sarah and Jackson's rifle. "You'll have to kill me first," he stated simply. Jackson's smile widened. "That can be arranged." He raised his rifle, taking aim. Cooper's hand flashed to his holster, but he was a fraction too slow. Jackson's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot that rang out didn't come from Jackson's rifle. From within the wagon, Dr. Levy had produced a small Derringer pistol. The doctor's hand shook, but at such close range it hardly mattered. Jackson toppled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder where the doctor's bullet had found its mark. Chaos erupted. Ethan drew and fired in one fluid motion, dropping a second man from his horse. Cooper engaged the third, the 2 men exchanging shots as they sought cover behind the fallen tree. "Get Sarah out of here!" Cooper shouted to Ethan. "I'll hold them off." Ethan hesitated, unwilling to abandon his friend. "Go!" Cooper insisted. "More will come when these don't return. Get to the ranch!" Making his decision, Ethan ran to the wagon, swinging up beside Dr. Levy, who sat ashen-faced, the spent Derringer still clutched in his trembling hand. "I've never shot anyone before," the elderly doctor whispered. "You saved our lives," Ethan replied, grabbing the reins. "Now hold on tight, both of you." With a shout to the team, he turned the wagon around, seeking another route through the pass. There was a game trail his men sometimes used, steeper and more treacherous, but wide enough for the wagon if they were careful. Behind them, Cooper continued to exchange fire with Jackson's remaining man, the gunshots echoing off the ridge walls. Ethan silently promised to return for his friend as soon as Sarah was safely at the ranch. The alternate trail proved as challenging as Ethan had feared. The horses strained against the harness, fighting for purchase on the ice-slicked path. Twice the wagon nearly overturned on sharp turns, saved only by Ethan's skilled handling of the team and some desperate shifting of weight by Dr. Levy. Sarah remained silent throughout the ordeal, her small body rigid with tension, but her eyes clear and focused. Not once did she cry or complain, even when the wagon jolted violently over hidden rocks. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, they crested the ridge and began the descent toward Triple M Ranch. In the valley below, lights glowed through the storm, the ranch house and bunkhouse, beacons of safety in the wilderness. Ethan allowed himself a moment of relief. They had made it. His foreman, Tom Wilson, was experienced and loyal, with a dozen good men under his command. The ranch was built with defense in mind, with clear fields of fire and sturdy walls. They could hold off Carter's men until the storm cleared and help could be summoned. As they approached the ranch's outer fence line, however, Ethan's relief evaporated. Something was wrong. The gate stood open. Tom always insisted it be closed and latched, regardless of weather. And the lights Ethan had spotted weren't the usual lamps in windows, but something far more ominous. The main barn was engulfed in flames, the fire a roaring inferno that defied the storm. Even from a distance, Ethan could see figures moving around the blaze, too many for just his ranch hands. And the shots that echoed across the valley confirmed his worst fears. Carter's men had beaten them to the ranch. "Stay here," Ethan ordered, drawing his rifle from beneath the wagon seat. "Keep the wagon in those trees, out of sight." "What are you going to do?" Dr. Levy asked, clutching Sarah protectively. Ethan checked his ammunition. 5 rounds in the rifle, 4 in his revolver. Not enough for a frontal assault, but perhaps sufficient for what he had in mind. "I'm going to create a diversion," he said grimly. "When you see the men move away from the house, make for the back door. Tom's wife, Martha, will help you hide Sarah." "And you?" Dr. Levy pressed. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Sarah, whose face had gone pale with understanding. "You're coming back, aren't you?" she whispered. Ethan forced a smile. "Of course, I promised to protect you, didn't I?" But Sarah wasn't fooled. She'd seen too many broken promises in her young life to be easily reassured. With sudden fierceness, she threw her arms around his neck, clinging to him. "Don't die," she commanded, her voice muffled against his coat. "I just found you." Ethan's throat tightened. He gently disentangled her arms and held her at arm's length, memorizing her face, Rebecca's eyes, and Mary's delicate features. "I'll do my best," he promised. "Now, be brave a little longer. Listen to Dr. Levy and stay hidden until I come for you." Before she could protest further, he slipped from the wagon and disappeared into the storm, moving with the silent efficiency of a man who had spent years in enemy territory during the war. The scene at the ranch was worse than he'd feared. The barn blazed like a funeral pyre, illuminating the ranch yard where several of his men lay motionless in the snow. Others had been corralled near the bunkhouse, guarded by armed men Ethan didn't recognize. Hired guns, most likely, brought in from outside the territory. Near the main house stood a figure Ethan did recognize, even from this distance. Judge Solomon Carter, immaculately dressed despite the storm, watching the proceedings with the detached interest of a man overseeing a routine business transaction. Cold fury settled in Ethan's gut. This wasn't just about recovering Sarah anymore. Carter had escalated to open warfare, attacking innocent men whose only crime was working for Ethan Morgan. Circling through the trees that lined the eastern edge of the property, Ethan positioned himself where he could observe without being seen. He counted at least 15 armed men, too many to confront directly. But if he could create enough confusion, perhaps draw some of them away from the house? The solution presented itself in the form of the ranch's second barn, currently untouched by the fire. Inside were stored barrels of kerosene for lamps and machinery, enough to create a significant distraction if ignited. Moving silently through the shadows, Ethan approached the structure. 2 guards patrolled outside, their attention divided between the captive ranch hands and the burning main barn. Neither noticed the dark figure that slipped past them into the smaller barn. Inside, Ethan worked quickly, positioning several kerosene barrels near the rear wall, away from the main house. He soaked a length of rope in the flammable liquid, creating a crude fuse that would give him time to retreat before the explosion. Just as he prepared to light the fuse, a voice spoke from the shadows. "I thought you might try something like this, Morgan." Judge Solomon Carter stepped into the dim light filtering through the barn's single window. He was alone, unarmed except for an ornate walking stick, a testament to his supreme confidence. "Carter?" Ethan acknowledged coldly, his hand moving toward his holstered revolver. "I wouldn't," Carter advised. "My men have orders to burn this place to the ground if they hear a shot." He gestured toward the window, where several armed figures were now visible surrounding the barn. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate your return?" Ethan's mind raced. Outside, his men remained captive, and somewhere in the storm, Dr. Levy and Sarah waited for his signal, a signal that would now lead them into a trap. "What do you want, Carter?" The judge smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Initially, just the return of my ward. A simple matter, easily resolved. But now," he shrugged elegantly, "now you've made this personal, involving Cooper, turning him against his own community, destroying the careful order I've established." "Order built on exploitation and murder," Ethan countered. Carter's smile didn't waver. "Progress requires sacrifice, Morgan. The mines, the railroad. They're bringing civilization to this wilderness. A few broken bodies along the way are merely the cost of advancement. Is that how you justify working your own daughter to death?" The words hung in the air between them. Carter's composure slipped for just a moment, a flicker of genuine surprise quickly masked by renewed control. "Ah," he said softly. "So Mary told her? I wondered if she might have." "You knew Sarah was yours all along," Ethan said, disgusted. "And still you gave her to Cordelia, knowing how that woman treats children." Carter shrugged. "Cordelia serves her purpose. She keeps the girl close, ensures she doesn't speak of things better left forgotten." He studied Ethan with newfound interest. "What I don't understand is your involvement. What is Sarah to you?" "My niece," Ethan replied. "Mary was my sister, Rebecca's sister." Understanding dawned in Carter's eyes, followed by something like amusement. "Rebecca Collins. Of course, I should have made the connection sooner." He tapped his walking stick thoughtfully against the floor. "You know, your sister was quite spirited, refused to accept her situation until the very end." Ice formed in Ethan's veins. "What are you talking about? Oh, did you think she died in that Indian attack?" A convenient explanation, but not quite accurate. Carter's smile widened. "Rebecca made it to Wyoming, Mr. Morgan. All the way to my mine, in fact, where her sister was already working off her obligations." The world seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask Sarah about the woman who taught her to read before Mary died, the one who told her stories about her brave brother who fought for the Union." Carter watched the impact of his words with clinical detachment. "Rebecca lasted nearly a year in the mine before the collapse. Quite impressive, really." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. Rebecca hadn't died on the trail. She'd reached Wyoming, only to be ensnared in Carter's operation, working, suffering, and ultimately dying while Ethan remained oblivious on his ranch, nursing his guilt and isolation. "I'm going to kill you," Ethan said, his voice eerily calm despite the rage building inside him. Carter sighed. "Predictable, but ultimately futile. Even if you somehow managed it, what then? The girl would still be hunted. My associates in the mining company and railroad have too much invested to allow their operations to be threatened by scandal. Then I'll take Sarah far from here, somewhere you and your associates will never find us." "There is no such place," Carter replied confidently, "but I'm not unreasonable. I have a proposal." He reached into his coat, withdrawing an envelope. "Inside is a draft for $5,000. Quite generous, I think you'll agree? Take it and leave Wyoming territory. Never return. Never speak of Sarah or what you believe you know about my operations." Ethan stared at the envelope, temptation warring with disgust. $5,000 would allow him to start fresh elsewhere, perhaps take Sarah to California or Oregon, far from Carter's immediate reach. But it would mean abandoning the other children in Cordelia's care, betraying Cooper, who had risked his career and life to help them. And ultimately, it would mean running instead of standing against the corruption that had claimed Rebecca's life. "Keep your blood money," Ethan said finally. "I'm not leaving without Sarah, and I'm not leaving this territory until justice is served for what you've done." Carter's expression hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." He raised his walking stick, rapping it sharply against the barn wall, a signal to his men waiting outside. The door burst open, and armed men poured into the barn. Ethan reached for his revolver, but was overwhelmed before he could fire a shot. Strong hands pinned his arms, forcing him to his knees before the judge. Carter looked down at him with cold contempt. You had your chance for a civilized resolution, Morgan. Now we do this the hard way. He nodded to his men. Bring him to the house and find the girl. She must be nearby. As they dragged him from the barn, Ethan caught sight of the ranch house, now surrounded by Carter's men. If Dr. Levy had followed his instructions and approached from the rear. His heart sank as he spotted two figures being escorted from the trees at gunpoint. The elderly doctor supporting Sarah, whose small face was pale with terror and exhaustion. Their eyes met across the ranch yard, and in that moment, Ethan saw his failure reflected in Sarah's desperate gaze. He had promised to protect her, as he had once promised Rebecca, and once again, he had failed. Carter approached the captured pair, studying Sarah with unsettling intensity. "Hello, child," he said, his voice falsely gentle. "It's time to go home." Sarah shrank against Dr. Levy, her eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "He's my uncle," she said, her voice small but steady. "My real family." Something dark flashed across Carter's features. "I am your only family," he said coldly, "and it's time you learned your place." He turned to his men. "Secure them in the house. When we're done here, burn it to the ground. Let this serve as an example of what happens to those who defy progress." As they were marched toward the ranch house, the storm finally began to abate, the wind dying to a low moan across the valley. In the distance, a new sound emerged, the rhythmic pounding of approaching hoofbeats, too numerous to be just Cooper returning. Carter heard it too, his head snapping up in alarm. "Who is that?" he demanded of his lieutenant. Before the man could answer, riders appeared on the ridge overlooking the ranch, at least 20 mounted figures silhouetted against the lightning-streaked sky. At their head rode Cooper, his badge catching the firelight as he raised his hand, signaling the riders to advance. "That would be the territorial militia," Ethan said, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. "Cooper must have reached them after all." Carter's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "Impossible! The passes are blocked by the storm." "There are other ways through these mountains," Ethan replied. "Ways known only to those who respect the land instead of exploiting it." As the riders descended toward the ranch, Carter's men began to waver, looking to their employer for direction. The judge's confident facade cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath. "Kill them all!" he ordered harshly. "The girl, too! Leave no witnesses!" His lieutenant hesitated. "Sir, that's the territorial militia. We can't—" "Do it!" Carter screamed, his composure completely abandoned. "I'll double your pay. Triple it!" But the approaching force had grown closer, and now Ethan could see they weren't all militiamen. Among Cooper's recruits were faces he recognized, townspeople from Redemption Springs, including Eleanor Simmons, rifle in hand, and several others who had suffered under Carter's regime. The tide was turning. Carter saw it too. With a snarl of frustration, he grabbed Sarah from Dr. Levy's protective embrace, dragging her toward the burning barn. "She's mine," he hissed, pressing a small derringer to the girl's temple. "My blood. No one else will have her." Sarah's eyes found Ethan's across the chaos of the ranch yard, wide with terror but still trusting, still believing he would keep his promise to protect her. In that moment, as militia and townspeople engaged Carter's hired guns in a chaotic firefight around them, Ethan made his decision. Rebecca had trusted him to protect the vulnerable. This time, he would not fail. With a roar that contained 15 years of buried grief and rage, Ethan broke free from his captors and charged toward Carter and Sarah, heedless of the bullets flying around him, focused only on keeping his promise, not just to Rebecca, but to the brave child who had risked everything to find him. Carter turned, his face a mask of hatred as he raised the derringer, shifting his aim from Sarah to Ethan's advancing form. The shot echoed across the ranch yard, momentarily drowning out all other sounds of battle. The shot rang out, but it wasn't Carter's derringer that fired. From the edge of the chaos, Eleanor Simmons stood with her husband's old hunting rifle still raised, wisps of smoke curling from its barrel. Carter staggered, his face frozen in surprise as he looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his immaculate coat. The derringer fell from his nerveless fingers into the snow. "That's for my daughter," Eleanor said, her voice carrying clearly across the sudden silence. Sarah broke free from Carter's weakening grip and ran to Ethan, who swept her into his arms, shielding her eyes from the sight of the judge collapsing to his knees in the blood-stained snow. "I knew you'd come," she whispered against his neck. Carter's men, seeing their employer fallen, began to surrender, dropping their weapons as Cooper and the militia surrounded them. The battle was ending almost as quickly as it had begun. But Carter wasn't finished. With blood bubbling at his lips, he raised his head to fix Ethan with a hate-filled stare. "You think this changes anything?" he rasped. "You have no idea what you're fighting against. The company. They won't let this stand." Cooper approached, his rifle trained on the wounded judge. "Solomon Carter, you're under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, assault, and conspiracy to commit murder." Carter's laugh was a wet, terrible sound. "You fool. I am the law in Redemption Springs." "Not anymore," Cooper replied, nodding toward the militia captain who stood nearby. "Captain Reynolds here represents the territorial governor. Your reign is over, Carter." The judge's face twisted with fury and pain. "The girl is mine!" he hissed, his gaze finding Sarah in Ethan's protective embrace. "My blood. Mine. She's a child," Ethan said quietly. "Not property, not yours, or anyone's." Carter struggled to rise, perhaps to make one last attempt to reach them, but the effort proved too much. He collapsed face first into the snow, his blood forming a stark crimson halo around him. Dr. Levy hurried forward to examine him, more from professional obligation than compassion. After a moment, the doctor looked up and shook his head. "He's gone." A strange hush fell over the ranch yard as the reality of Carter's death settled over the assembled crowd. For so long, he had seemed untouchable, a force of nature rather than a mere man. Now he lay dead in the snow, as vulnerable and mortal as those he had exploited. Ethan felt no satisfaction, only a weary relief that the immediate danger had passed. He looked down at Sarah, still clutched tightly in his arms, her face buried against his shoulder. "It's over," he told her gently. "You're safe now." But even as he spoke the words, Ethan knew they weren't entirely true. Carter might be dead, but the corrupt system he had built would not die with him. The mining company, the railroad interests, the bought officials, all would continue without him, perhaps finding a new frontman to maintain their operations. Cooper seemed to share this concern. As the militia began rounding up Carter's remaining men, the marshal approached Ethan, his expression grim despite their victory. "We've won the battle," he said quietly. "But the war is just beginning. Carter was right about one thing. The company won't let this go. There's too much money at stake." Ethan nodded, his arms tightening around Sarah. "Then we'd better be ready." The sun was rising now, casting long shadows across the ranch yard as the storm clouds retreated to the west. The main barn continued to burn, but ranch hands were working to contain the fire, forming a bucket line from the well to prevent it from spreading. Tom Wilson, Ethan's foreman, approached with Martha at his side. The sturdy woman immediately reached for Sarah. "Let me take her inside," she insisted. "The poor child needs warmth and rest, not to be standing out here in the cold." Ethan hesitated, reluctant to let Sarah out of his sight even now. "It's all right, Uncle Ethan," Sarah said softly. "I'm very tired." The simple admission broke his heart. She had been so brave, so determined, that he'd almost forgotten she was just a child who had endured more in her short life than most adults. "Go with Martha," he agreed gently, setting her on her feet. "I'll be in soon." As Sarah was led toward the ranch house, Dr. Levy joined Ethan and Cooper. "What happens now?" the doctor asked. Cooper gestured to Captain Reynolds, who was conferring with his men nearby. "The captain has orders to investigate corruption in the territory. Carter's death will expedite matters, but there are still his associates to contend with." "Cordelia Blackwood, for one," Ethan said grimly, "and the children still in her care." "We'll deal with her," Cooper assured him. "But first, we need to secure what evidence we have. Sarah's mother's marriage certificate. Any other documents that prove Carter's involvement? Ethan frowned. Will that be enough? Carter was careful. There's a reason he's operated unopposed for so long. Perhaps not, Dr. Levy interjected. But I believe I may have something that will help. He reached into his coat, withdrawing a small, leather-bound book. Mary Collins's complete diary. Sarah entrusted it to me during our journey. Ethan stared at the journal in surprise. I thought she only had the one page and the marriage certificate. Dr. Levy shook his head. She kept the rest hidden from Cordelia all these years. It contains detailed accounts of Carter's operation, names, dates, financial arrangements. Mary was quite thorough in documenting the judge's crimes. Cooper took the diary reverently. This could be the key to bringing down Carter's entire network. Then use it, Ethan said firmly. But ensure Sarah is protected. She's been through enough without becoming the center of a legal battle. The marshal nodded in agreement. I'll take personal responsibility for her safety. No one will harm her while I draw breath. Ethan believed him. Cooper had proven his loyalty beyond any doubt, risking his career and life to stand against corruption. Such men were rare on the frontier, where survival often trumped principles. As they spoke, Eleanor Simmons approached, her rifle now slung over her shoulder. The normally reserved widow's face showed no regret for her actions. I should have done that years ago, she said simply, when he took my Lydia. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. You did what was necessary. No one will fault you for it. Eleanor nodded, then fixed him with a direct gaze. What about the girl? What happens to her now? It was a question Ethan had been avoiding since finding Sarah. In the immediacy of danger, his only focus had been keeping her safe. Now, with Carter dead and the immediate threat neutralized, longer-term considerations arose. She stays with me, he said, the decision crystallizing even as he spoke the words. She's my niece, my blood. Rebecca would have wanted me to care for her. It won't be easy, Eleanor warned. A single man raising a young girl will raise eyebrows, even out here. Then they can raise all they want, Ethan replied firmly. Sarah has lost everyone she's ever loved. I won't let her lose me too. The determination in his voice silenced further argument. Eleanor nodded, satisfied, and moved away to help with the wounded. Cooper watched her go with newfound respect. Remarkable woman. Shot the most powerful man in the territory without blinking an eye. Frontier women are made of steel, Dr. Levy observed. They have to be to survive out here. Ethan couldn't disagree. From Eleanor's quiet strength to Martha Wilson's practical kindness to Sarah's incredible resilience, the women he'd encountered possessed a core of iron that many men lacked. As the cleanup from the battle continued around them, Ethan excused himself and headed toward the ranch house. He needed to see Sarah, to reassure himself that she was truly safe after everything they'd endured. He found her in the small guest room off the kitchen, tucked into bed with Martha fussing over her like a mother hen. Despite her exhaustion, Sarah was still awake, her blue eyes following his entry with an alertness that spoke of years spent watching for danger. How are you feeling? He asked, taking a seat on the edge of the bed. Warm, she replied, a hint of wonder in her voice. It's been so long since I was really warm. The simple statement tightened Ethan's throat. How long had this child lived with constant cold, constant hunger, constant fear? Martha tactfully slipped from the room, leaving uncle and niece alone. Is he really dead? Sarah asked after a moment, her voice small. Ethan nodded. Yes, he can't hurt you anymore. Sarah absorbed this, her young face solemn. I should be glad, she said slowly. But I just feel empty. That's natural, Ethan assured her. Death isn't something to celebrate, even when it's someone who caused harm. She considered this, then asked, What happens now? Will I go to an orphanage? The fear underlying the question was palpable. After Cordelia's care, Sarah's concept of adult guardianship was understandably skewed toward exploitation and cruelty. No, Ethan said firmly. You'll stay here, with me, if that's what you want. Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly tempered by caution. Really? You won't send me away when I'm too much trouble? Ethan took her small hand in his. Sarah, you're my niece. Rebecca's blood. That makes you family, and family sticks together. I promise you'll always have a home here, for as long as you want it. She studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity. Finding none, she relaxed slightly. I'd like that, she whispered, to stay here with you. Then it's settled, he replied, squeezing her hand gently. Now rest. You're safe. As Sarah's eyes finally closed, surrendering to exhaustion, Ethan remained by her side, watching over her sleep. In just days, this child had transformed his life, awakening emotions he'd thought long buried after Rebecca's disappearance. Grief still lingered, especially with the revelation that his sister had reached Wyoming, only to die in Carter's mine. But alongside that grief now grew something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. A soft knock at the door announced Cooper's arrival. The marshal gestured for Ethan to join him in the hallway, careful not to disturb Sarah's sleep. Captain Reynolds and his men are preparing to return to town, Cooper informed him quietly. They'll take Carter's body and his captured men with them. Ethan nodded. Good. The sooner Carter's influence is removed from Redemption Springs, the better. There's more, Cooper continued, his expression troubled. Reynolds received a telegram before leaving town. The mining company is sending representatives, lawyers, most likely, to assess the situation following Carter's death. How did they learn of it so quickly? Ethan asked, alarmed. Telegraph operator in town works for them, Cooper explained grimly. News travels fast when money's involved. Ethan considered the implications. They'll try to bury everything, protect their investments. Almost certainly, Cooper agreed. And they'll be especially interested in Sarah once they learn of her connection to Carter. The thought of corporate lawyers attempting to claim Sarah as a ward of the company, perhaps to control any inheritance she might be entitled to from Carter's estate, made Ethan's blood run cold. They'll have to go through me first, he said quietly. Cooper nodded, unsurprised by his friend's determination. I figured as much. That's why I've already dispatched a rider to the territorial capital with Mary's diary and a full report of today's events. By the time the company's representatives arrive, the governor will already be aware of the situation. Will it be enough? It should buy us time at least, Cooper replied. And time is what we need most now. Time to gather more evidence. Time to ensure Sarah's legal status as your ward is solidified. Time to dismantle Carter's network before it can reorganize. Ethan considered this. What about Cordelia and the other children? Reynolds has men heading to the Red Garter as we speak. Cordelia will be arrested. The children taken into protective custody. Cooper's expression darkened. Though I fear we may be too late for some of them. The implication hung heavy between them. Cordelia, aware of Carter's death, might have already taken steps to eliminate witnesses or evidence. I should go with them, Ethan decided. Those children will be terrified of more armed men. Cooper shook his head. Your place is here with Sarah. She needs you more than ever now. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Trust me to handle this part, old friend. I won't fail those children. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan nodded. Cooper was right. Sarah had to be his priority now. And after everything they'd endured together, leaving her so soon after promising to stay would only reinforce her fears of abandonment. Be careful, he warned. Cordelia is cornered now, and that makes her dangerous. I've faced worse, Cooper replied with a grim smile. Remember Antietam? The reference to their shared battlefield past lightened the moment slightly. They had indeed survived worse situations, though in those days the enemy had been clearly defined. The battle lines drawn in open fields rather than hidden behind legal documents and corporate interests. After Cooper departed with Captain Reynolds and his men, Ethan returned to Sarah's bedside. He pulled up a chair, settling in for a long vigil. Outside, ranch hands continued clearing debris from the battle, assessing damage to the buildings and tending to the injured. Tom Wilson reported that 3 of Ethan's men had been killed in Carter's initial attack, with 5 more wounded. The casualties would have been far higher without Cooper's timely arrival. "We'll bury our dead at sunset," Tom said solemnly. Proper-like, with words said over them. Ethan nodded, guilt weighing heavily on him. Those men had died because of his decision to protect Sarah, a decision he couldn't regret, but one whose consequences he would have to bear. "See that their families are provided for," he instructed. "Double wages, continued for a year at least." Tom nodded, unsurprised by the order. Ethan had always been fair with his men, generous even, which explained their loyalty despite the isolated nature of ranch life. As afternoon faded toward evening, Dr. Levy examined Sarah once more, pronouncing her physically exhausted but otherwise remarkably resilient. "Children have an amazing capacity to recover," he observed, "though the scars inside often take longer to heal than those we can see." Ethan knew this all too well from his own experiences of war and loss. "Will she be all right, after everything she's witnessed?" Dr. Levy considered the question carefully. "With time, patience, and most importantly, stability and love. Yes, I believe she will." He packed his medical bag as he spoke. "She's a remarkable child, Mr. Morgan. Intelligent, observant, and with a strength of character rarely seen in one so young." "Like her aunt," Ethan said softly. "Indeed." Dr. Levy hesitated, then added, "The revelation about Rebecca must have been quite a shock." Ethan's jaw tightened. The knowledge that his sister had reached Wyoming, had been so close to finding him, only to die in Carter's mine, continued to torment him. "I should have looked harder, should have questioned the reports of the attack." "You couldn't have known," Dr. Levy reminded him gently, "and tormenting yourself with what might have been serves no purpose now. Rebecca would want you to focus on the living, on Sarah." The doctor's words, though difficult to accept, contained a wisdom Ethan couldn't ignore. Rebecca was beyond his help now, but Sarah wasn't. He could honor his sister's memory by ensuring her niece never knew the hardship she had endured. As dusk approached, Cooper returned from town, his expression grave. Ethan, who had been helping Tom organize the funeral for the fallen ranch hands, immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked as soon as they were alone. Cooper removed his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. "Cordelia Blackwood is dead. Suicide, apparently. Poisoned herself when she heard about Carter. And the children?" "4 rescued from the cellar beneath the Red Garter," Cooper reported. "Terrified, but alive. There were signs of others, but no trace of them. God knows where they ended up." Ethan swore softly. "So Cordelia takes her secrets to the grave." "Not all of them," Cooper countered. "We found ledgers hidden in her quarters, detailed records of children brought to Wyoming under false pretenses, their placements with various operations, payments received." His expression hardened. "Names of officials who looked the other way. Your sister Rebecca is listed among the women brought west in '68. The confirmation of what Carter had claimed sent a fresh wave of grief through Ethan. "Any mention of Mary Collins?" Cooper nodded. "Mary was brought over a year earlier, in '67. According to the ledger, she was special merchandise reserved for Carter personally." He hesitated. "There's also mention of a child born to her in early '65, Sarah." "So it's true," Ethan said heavily. "Sarah is Carter's daughter." "By blood, perhaps," Cooper agreed. "But blood isn't always what matters most in defining family." The wisdom in those words resonated with Ethan. Sarah was his niece through Rebecca and Mary's sisterhood, a connection of chosen family rather than direct blood. That she also carried Carter's blood was an unfortunate accident of birth, not a defining characteristic. "Have you told her?" Cooper asked. "About Rebecca reaching Wyoming? About Carter being her father?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. She's been through enough for now. There will be time for those truths later, when she's stronger." Cooper seemed about to argue, but thought better of it. "Your decision. But children often understand more than we give them credit for, and secrets have a way of emerging at the worst possible times." Before Ethan could respond, a commotion erupted from the direction of the main road. Riders were approaching, at least a dozen, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies in the gathering darkness. Company representatives, Cooper guessed grimly. Sooner than expected. Ethan moved toward the house, intent on checking on Sarah, but Cooper stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Let me handle this," the marshal urged. "You stay with Sarah. If they see you, they'll know immediately where to focus their attention." Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. Cooper was right. The less direct confrontation at this stage, the better their chances of protecting Sarah from corporate interests. Inside the guest room, Sarah was awake, sitting up in bed while Martha brushed her tangled blonde hair. The domesticity of the scene struck Ethan forcefully. How quickly children could adapt when finally feeling safe. "There's more trouble, isn't there?" Sarah asked perceptively as soon as Martha left them alone. "I heard horses." Ethan considered deflecting but decided against it. Cooper was right. Children understood more than adults often believed. "Yes," he admitted, taking his usual seat beside her bed. "Men from the mining company Carter worked with. They're probably not happy about what happened." Sarah's face fell. "They've come for me, haven't they? Because of who my father was." The directness of the statement caught Ethan by surprise. "You knew about Carter." She nodded solemnly. "Mama told me before she died. Said I must never let him know that I knew, or he might hurt me worse." Her small hands twisted in the blanket. "I don't want to be his. I want to be yours, and Aunt Rebecca's." "You are," Ethan assured her firmly, taking her hands in his. "What Carter did to your mother doesn't define you, Sarah. You're a Collins, like Rebecca and Mary, like me." "But what if the mining men say different?" she pressed, her voice tight with fear. "What if they make me go with them?" "That won't happen," Ethan promised. "Cooper and I won't allow it. You're staying right here, where you belong." Sarah studied his face intently, then nodded, apparently satisfied with what she saw there. "I believe you," she said simply. The trust in those 3 words nearly undid him. After everything she'd endured, after all the broken promises and betrayals she'd experienced in her young life, Sarah was choosing to believe in him. It was a responsibility Ethan didn't take lightly. Outside, voices rose in argument, Cooper's familiar tones countered by several others, educated, Eastern accents that sounded jarringly out of place on a Wyoming ranch. The mining company had indeed sent their representatives, and judging by the increasing volume, negotiations weren't proceeding smoothly. "I should see what's happening," Ethan said reluctantly. Sarah nodded her understanding. "Be careful, Uncle Ethan." The childish concern in her voice brought a smile to his lips. "I will, and I'll be right back. Promise." On the ranch house porch, Cooper stood with Captain Reynolds, facing 4 well-dressed men who had dismounted from their horses. Behind them waited a contingent of armed guards, hired guns rather than legitimate law officers, judging by their appearance. "Mr. Morgan," one of the men greeted him as Ethan emerged from the house. "Harold Wickham, legal counsel for Western Mining Consolidated. We were just discussing recent unfortunate events with Marshal Cooper." Ethan regarded the lawyer coolly. "My ranch isn't open to uninvited visitors, Mr. Wickham, especially those who arrive armed after sunset." Wickham smiled thinly. "A precaution merely, given the violent occurrences of this morning. We have no hostile intentions." "Then state your business and be on your way," Ethan replied bluntly. "It's been a long day, and we're preparing to bury our dead." The lawyer's smile faltered at the direct approach. "Very well. We understand you have taken custody of a minor child formerly under Judge Carter's guardianship, a girl named Sarah Collins." "My niece," Ethan corrected firmly. "Daughter of my sister's sister." Wickham exchanged a glance with his colleagues. "Be that as it may, we have reason to believe the child may be entitled to certain considerations as Judge Carter's legal ward. The company wishes to ensure her interests are properly protected." "Her interests are already protected," Cooper interjected, "by her uncle and by territorial law." "Nevertheless," Wickham persisted, "given Judge Carter's extensive business dealings with Western Mining, we feel obligated to." You feel obligated to ensure no uncomfortable truths emerge about your operation? Ethan cut in coldly. Let's not pretend this is about Sarah's welfare. The lawyer's facade of civility slipped slightly. Mr. Morgan, our company has invested considerably in this territory. Judge Carter was a valued partner in progress. His sudden death raises questions that must be addressed. Then address them with the territorial governor, Captain Reynolds spoke up. I've forwarded all relevant evidence to him directly, including Mary Collins's diary, detailing your company's involvement in labor exploitation, fraud, and concealing fatal accidents. Wickham's expression hardened. Unsubstantiated accusations from a deceased woman of questionable character hardly constitute evidence. The dismissive tone ignited Ethan's temper. Mary Collins was my sister's sister, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. A woman your company lured west under false pretenses, whose labor you exploited and whose death you covered up. Choose your next words with extreme care, Mr. Wickham. A tense silence fell over the gathering. The lawyer seemed to recognize he'd overstepped, his demeanor shifting to a more conciliatory approach. Perhaps we've begun on the wrong foot, he offered. Western Mining has no desire for further conflict. We merely wish to ensure an orderly transition following Judge Carter's unfortunate passing. There will be no transition, Cooper stated firmly. Carter's operations are under investigation for multiple criminal violations. Any company assets tied to illegal activities will be subject to seizure and review. Wickham's colleague shifted uncomfortably at this pronouncement, but the lawyer maintained his composure. We understand the territorial authorities must follow procedure, he acknowledged smoothly. However, the company's legitimate business interests must also be respected. As for the child, Sarah, we merely wish to ensure she receives what she is entitled to as Carter's ward. She's entitled to a childhood free from exploitation, Ethan replied, which is exactly what she'll get here with me. Before Wickham could respond, the ranch house door opened and Sarah herself appeared on the porch. Despite Martha's attempts to restrain her, the child stepped forward to stand beside Ethan, her small hand slipping into his. I'm not going with you, she said clearly, addressing Wickham directly. I know what you did to my mama and the others. It's all in her diary. The lawyer's confident expression faltered as he took in the child's resolute stance. Young lady, you don't understand the complexities. I understand enough, Sarah interrupted with a maturity beyond her years. Judge Carter wasn't my guardian. He was a bad man who hurt people and you helped him. A murmur ran through the gathered men at this direct accusation. Even Wickham's colleagues looked uncomfortable, exchanging uncertain glances. Ethan placed a protective hand on Sarah's shoulder, ready to intervene. But the child wasn't finished. My uncle is my family now, she continued firmly. And Marshall Cooper has Mama's diary where she wrote down all the bad things you did, so you should go away before more people get hurt. The simple, devastating clarity of her statement hung in the air. In that moment, Sarah didn't appear as a vulnerable child, but as a powerful witness whose testimony could unravel years of corporate malfeasance. Wickham recovered his composure with visible effort. Well, it seems the child has strong opinions. He turned to his colleagues. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in town with the local authorities. An excellent suggestion, Cooper agreed, though his tone suggested he was fully aware of the lawyer's attempt to retreat strategically. Captain Reynolds and I will be happy to review any documentation you have regarding Western Mining's operations in the territory. Recognizing defeat, at least for the moment, Wickham nodded stiffly. We'll speak again, Mr. Morgan, he said, the words carrying an unmistakable undertone of threat. Whenever you wish, Ethan replied evenly. During daylight hours, unarmed and with proper notice. As the lawyers and their guards remounted and departed, Ethan knelt beside Sarah. That was very brave, he told her quietly, but also dangerous. These men aren't like Carter. They hide behind laws and money rather than direct threats. Sarah nodded solemnly. I know. But Mama always said the truth is strongest when spoken plainly. She looked up at him, her blue eyes seeking reassurance. Did I do wrong? No. Ethan replied honestly. Not wrong, just risky. He squeezed her hand gently. Next time, though, perhaps wait until we've discussed strategy before confronting mining company lawyers. A small smile flickered across her face, the first real smile Ethan had seen from her. All right, I promise. As they returned inside, Cooper and Captain Reynolds followed, their expressions grave despite the temporary victory. They'll be back, Cooper warned once Sarah was out of earshot. With more lawyers, more documentation, perhaps even a sympathetic judge from another district. Let them come, Ethan replied grimly. We'll be ready. Reynolds wasn't so confident. Western mining has powerful connections, Morgan. In the territorial capital, even in Washington, this won't be as simple as facing down Carter and his local thugs. Nothing worth fighting forever is, Ethan countered. My sister died in their mine. Sarah's mother, too. How many others have been sacrificed for their profits? At some point, someone has to take a stand. Cooper nodded in agreement. And that stand begins with securing Sarah's legal status as your ward. I've already drafted the paperwork based on her blood relation to you through Rebecca. We'll file it first thing tomorrow. Will it be enough? Ethan asked. It's a start, Reynolds answered. Blood ties carry significant weight, even out here where law is still more ideal than reality. But be prepared for a fight, Morgan. Men like Wickham don't retreat for long. As night settled fully over Triple M Ranch, Ethan returned to Sarah's bedside. She had finally drifted into a deep sleep, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd found her standing barefoot in the snow. Watching her, Ethan made a silent vow. Whatever came next, legal battles, corporate pressure, threats from Carter's remaining allies, he would face it. Not just for Rebecca's memory or Mary's sacrifice, but for Sarah herself. This child who had endured so much deserved a chance at the childhood that had been stolen from her. Outside, ranch hands were conducting the burial service for their fallen comrades. The solemn sound of hymns drifted through the night air as Ethan maintained his vigil, guarding Sarah's sleep as twilight deepened into full darkness. In the morning, they would begin building something new from the ashes of violence and corruption. A life where Sarah could grow up knowing safety, education, and love. But tonight, simply surviving was victory enough. As Ethan finally allowed himself to doze in the chair beside Sarah's bed, he dreamed not of battlefields or loss, but of Rebecca as he'd last seen her, young and hopeful, setting out to find him in Wyoming. In the dream, she smiled and nodded her approval, her hand resting on Sarah's shoulder. You found her, Dream Rebecca said simply, when I couldn't. I'll keep her safe, Ethan promised, for both of us. Rebecca's image began to fade. Don't just keep her safe, brother. Teach her to live, to be brave, to stand in the light. Ethan woke with a start to find Sarah watching him, her blue eyes solemn in the pre-dawn dimness. You were talking in your sleep, she informed him. You said, I promise, over and over. Did I? Ethan smiled slightly. Well, I meant it. Sarah nodded, accepting this without question. Uncle Ethan, can I ask you something important? Of course. She hesitated, gathering her courage. Can you teach me to ride a horse and shoot a gun? So next time bad men come, I can help protect our home too. The request, so earnest and unexpected, caught Ethan off guard. But looking at Sarah's determined expression, he recognized the same resilience that had helped her survive Cordelia's abuse, Carter's threats, and the mining company's attempt to claim her. Yes, he decided. When you're stronger, I'll teach you both. Every person should know how to protect themselves and those they love. Sarah's smile illuminated her entire face, transforming her from a solemn, wary child into the girl she might have been without suffering's heavy shadow. And we'll get the other children, too, she pressed. The ones from Miss Cordelia's cellar. They don't have anyone either. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. We'll do what we can for them. I promise. As dawn broke over Triple M Ranch, casting golden light across the snow-covered valley, Ethan realized that in trying to save one child, he had inadvertently embarked on a much larger battle, not just against Western mining or Carter's corrupt legacy, but against a system that viewed children as commodities rather than human beings deserving of protection and care. It wouldn't be easy. The mining company's lawyers would return. Questions about his suitability as guardian for a young girl would arise. The other children rescued from Cordelia's basement would need advocates too. But for the first time since losing Rebecca, Ethan felt truly alive, his purpose clear. This was a fight worth having, a stand worth taking, not just for Sarah, but for all the vulnerable souls who had no one else to champion their cause. Outside, Cooper was organizing the day's proceedings, while inside, Martha prepared breakfast for the growing number of people seeking shelter at Triple M. The ranch, once Ethan's solitary retreat from the world, was becoming something else entirely. A sanctuary, a stronghold against the darkness that had too long shadowed Redemption Springs. Sarah slipped her small hand into his. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Ethan squeezed her fingers gently. "Now we build something new, something better." And as the morning light strengthened, casting long shadows behind them but illuminating the path ahead, Ethan knew that whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together. Uncle and niece, survivors both, finding their way forward into the light. Spring came early to Wyoming territory that year, melting the snowdrifts around Triple M Ranch and transforming the valley into a canvas of vibrant green. 3 months had passed since the confrontation with Carter, and on the surface, life had settled into a new rhythm. Ethan stood on the porch of the main house, watching Sarah guide her pony through basic maneuvers in the corral. She rode with growing confidence, her small frame straight in the saddle, blonde hair braided neatly down her back. The transformation in the girl was remarkable. Physically stronger now, her face filled out from regular meals, her eyes clear and focused rather than shadowed with fear. "She's a natural," Cooper observed, joining Ethan on the porch. He'd become a regular visitor, his official duties in Redemption Springs often extending to Triple M. "Takes to riding like she was born to it." Ethan nodded, unable to hide his pride. "She's determined. Gets up before dawn some days to practice." Cooper smiled, though his eyes remained serious. "Good skills to have, especially considering our situation." The reminder of their precarious position sobered Ethan instantly. Despite Cooper's efforts, the legal battles surrounding Sarah and Carter's legacy had intensified rather than diminished. Western Mining had brought in additional lawyers from Denver and even San Francisco, filing motion after motion to challenge Ethan's guardianship and assert corporate rights to Carter's assets, including, by extension, any claim Sarah might have as his biological daughter. "Any news from the Capitol?" Ethan asked quietly, ensuring Sarah couldn't overhear. Cooper's expression tightened. "Not good, I'm afraid. Judge Harrison has scheduled a formal hearing on Western's petition. They're pushing hard for Sarah to be placed under corporate guardianship for her financial benefit." "Meaning they want control of Carter's shares and holdings," Ethan translated grimly. "Exactly. And they've brought in character witnesses against you. People claiming you're unstable from war experiences, unsuitable to raise a young girl." Cooper hesitated. "Including Cordelia's former bartender. He's testifying that Sarah was well cared for before you abducted her." Ethan's hands clenched on the porch railing. "That's absurd. The man's being paid to lie." "Of course he is," Cooper agreed. "But Harrison doesn't know that, or pretends not to. Western Mining has made substantial donations to various territorial projects he supports." The corrupt nature of frontier justice was hardly surprising, but the extent of Western Mining's influence remained troubling. They weren't just fighting one corrupt judge anymore, but an entire corporate apparatus determined to protect its interests regardless of human cost. "When is the hearing?" Ethan asked. 2 weeks, in the territorial capital." Cooper placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Ethan, you should prepare Sarah. If Harrison rules against us—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. If the judge ruled in Western Mining's favor, they would come for Sarah immediately, with legal authority to remove her from Ethan's care. "I won't let them take her," Ethan said, his voice low and fierce. Cooper sighed. "I know. But consider what that means, old friend." Defying a court order would make you a fugitive. You'd have to leave Wyoming, probably head west to Oregon or California. Leave everything you've built here. The thought of abandoning Triple M, the ranch he'd spent 15 years building, was painful. But watching Sarah guide her pony in a perfect circle, her face alight with accomplishment, Ethan knew there was no real choice to make. "If it comes to that, we'll go," he said simply. "I've moved before. I can do it again." Cooper nodded, unsurprised. "I've taken the liberty of contacting some old Union Army friends in California, just in case." He lowered his voice further. "And I've arranged for a horse relay along the western route. If you need to leave quickly, there will be fresh mounts waiting at strategic points." The fact that Cooper, a federal marshal sworn to uphold the law, would help them evade a court order spoke volumes about both his friendship and his disgust with the corruption they faced. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, "for everything." Their conversation was interrupted as Sarah trotted her pony to the corral fence, her face flushed with exertion and pride. "Did you see Uncle Ethan? I made her turn just using my legs like you showed me." "I saw," he confirmed, forcing a smile despite his troubled thoughts. "You're becoming quite the horsewoman." Sarah beamed at the praise, then noticed Cooper. "Marshal Cooper! Are you staying for supper? Martha's making apple pie." Cooper tipped his hat to her. "I wouldn't miss it, Miss Sarah." As Sarah led her pony toward the stable, the men exchanged a glance. The child had found happiness here, a sense of home and belonging after years of abuse and neglect. The thought of that being ripped away from her yet again made Ethan's blood boil. "We should tell her," Cooper advised gently. "Not everything, but enough so she's prepared." Ethan nodded reluctantly. "Tonight, after supper." The evening meal had become a communal affair at Triple M. Besides Ethan, Sarah, and the ranch's permanent hands, the table now regularly included Dr. Levy, who had relocated his practice to a small cabin on Ethan's property following threats in town, and Eleanor Simmons, who had similarly moved to the ranch after her boarding house was mysteriously burned to the ground, a clear message from Western Mining's less official representatives. Additionally, the 4 children rescued from Cordelia's cellar now lived at Triple M. With no relatives coming forward, and the territorial orphanage overcrowded, Ethan had offered them shelter. They ranged in age from 6 to 12, each bearing scars from their time in Cordelia's care. Sarah had appointed herself their unofficial leader and protector, showing remarkable patience and helping them adjust to life without constant fear. "Josiah read a whole page by himself today," Sarah announced proudly during supper, causing the youngest boy to blush furiously. "He's learning so fast." "That's wonderful," Ethan praised, genuinely impressed with both Josiah's progress and Sarah's dedication. Eleanor, who had taken on the role of educator for the children, nodded in agreement. "Sarah's quite the teacher's assistant. She has a natural gift for explanation." The conversation continued pleasantly through the meal and into dessert, with Martha's apple pie receiving universal acclaim. Only when the children had been excused to prepare for bed did Cooper discreetly signal Ethan that it was time for their more serious discussion. "Sarah," Ethan called as she prepared to follow the others upstairs, "could you stay a moment? We need to talk." Something in his tone must have alerted her. Her smile faded, replaced by the watchful weariness that still emerged in moments of stress. "Am I in trouble?" she asked quietly, returning to her chair. "Not at all," Ethan assured her. "But there's something important we need to discuss." With Cooper and Eleanor present for support, Ethan explained in simplified terms the legal challenges they were facing. He avoided mentioning Carter's biological connection to Sarah, focusing instead on Western Mining's determination to gain control over her future. "They're saying I shouldn't live here anymore?" Sarah asked, her voice small but steady. "They're trying to," Ethan confirmed. "But Cooper and I are fighting it. Judge Harrison will make a decision in 2 weeks." "And if he says I have to go with them?" Ethan exchanged a glance with Cooper before answering carefully. "If that happens, we have a plan. We might need to leave Wyoming for a while until we can sort things out properly." Sarah absorbed this, her young face solemn. "Leave the ranch? But this is our home." "Home isn't a place, sweetheart," Eleanor interjected gently. It's the people you're with. You and Ethan will still be family, wherever you go. Sarah considered this wisdom, then looked directly at Ethan. Would Marshal Cooper and Dr. Levy come too? And Eleanor? And the other children? The simple question revealed her greatest fear, not leaving the ranch, but losing her newly formed family. That would be complicated, Ethan admitted honestly, but we'd make sure everyone was safe and taken care of. Sarah's shoulders slumped slightly, but she nodded in acceptance. When will we know? 2 weeks, Cooper repeated. Until then, we carry on as normal. But Sarah, this is important. If anyone you don't know tries to speak with you, or if you see strangers around the ranch, you come tell one of us immediately. Understand? Yes, sir, she replied solemnly. Is it like when Miss Cordelia would send men to find children who ran away? The innocent comparison sent a chill through the room. Ethan reached across the table to take her hand. Something like that, he acknowledged. But you're not alone anymore. We're all watching out for you. After Sarah had gone upstairs, the adults remained at the table, the weight of their situation hanging heavy in the air. She took it well, Eleanor observed quietly. Too well, Ethan replied. She's had too much practice accepting bad news. Cooper sighed heavily. There's more you should know. Western Mining isn't limiting their strategy to legal channels. There have been reports of hired guns arriving in Redemption Springs, professional troublemakers, not local talent. Preparing for resistance if they win the court case, Ethan surmised. Or creating leverage before it, Cooper corrected grimly. They've been asking questions about the ranch's defenses, your daily routines. I've doubled the deputy patrols in the area, but my resources are limited. We should increase security here, too, Ethan decided. Extra men on watch, especially at night. Eleanor rose from the table. I'll speak with Martha about organizing the supplies in case we need to leave quickly. Food, medicine, clothing for the children. Her practical nature reasserted itself, transforming the widow into a formidable logistics expert. As their plans took shape, Ethan found himself torn between hope and preparation for the worst. The legal case wasn't entirely hopeless. Mary's diary provided compelling evidence of corporate wrongdoing, and Sarah's blood relationship to him through Rebecca established a legitimate claim to guardianship. But Western Mining's resources far outstripped their own, and frontier justice often favored power over principle. Later that night, after the house had quieted, Ethan made his usual rounds, checking doors and windows. He paused at Sarah's room, hearing not the even breathing of sleep, but the soft scratch of pencil on paper. He knocked gently before opening the door. Sarah sat cross-legged on her bed, a drawing pad balanced on her knees, illuminated by the oil lamp on her bedside table. Can't sleep? Ethan asked, entering the room. Sarah shook her head, continuing to sketch. I'm making maps, she explained, of the ranch and the trails we ride, in case we have to leave quickly. The practicality of her preparation, so adult in its foresight, broke Ethan's heart. Children her age should be drawing horses or flowers, not escape routes. That's very clever, he said, sitting beside her on the bed. But you need your rest, too. Sarah set aside her pencil, looking up at him with those unnervingly direct blue eyes. Uncle Ethan, if the bad men come from the mining company, will you have to kill them, like Judge Carter? The question caught him off guard. I hope it doesn't come to that, he answered carefully. Cooper and I are trying to solve this peacefully, through the law. But the law isn't always right, Sarah observed with the simple clarity of a child who had seen law's failures firsthand. Judge Carter was the law in town, and he was bad. That's true, Ethan acknowledged. Sometimes the law gets twisted by people with power, but that doesn't mean we should abandon it altogether. Without law, life becomes even harder for those who are vulnerable. Sarah considered this, then asked, Is that why you fought in the war? For better laws? In a way, Ethan replied, surprised by her insight. I fought because I believed everyone deserved freedom and fair treatment, not just those with power. Like the children at Miss Cordelia's, Sarah nodded in understanding. We deserved better, too. Yes, Ethan agreed softly. You did, and you still do. Sarah returned to her map, adding small details with careful precision. I won't go with the mining men, she stated with quiet determination. Even if the judge says I have to, I'd run away and find you. The simple declaration, spoken without drama or fear, underscored the bond that had formed between them. Sarah trusted him completely, believing in his protection even against the might of Western mining and corrupt territorial justice. It won't come to that, Ethan promised, though he couldn't be certain. Now, time for sleep. We have riding lessons in the morning. Sarah obediently set aside her drawing pad and slipped under the covers. As Ethan turned to leave, she called after him softly. Uncle Ethan, do you think Mama and Aunt Rebecca would be proud of us? Fighting the mining company? Ethan paused in the doorway, struck by the question. Yes, he replied with absolute certainty. They would be very proud. Especially of you. Sarah smiled at that, a genuine smile that transformed her serious face. Good night, Uncle Ethan. Good night, Sarah, he responded, closing the door gently behind him. In the hallway, Ethan leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the responsibility he'd undertaken. Not just for Sarah, but for all the children now under his protection, for the ranch hands who depended on him, for Eleanor and Dr. Levy, who had sacrificed their own safety to stand with him. Cooper was right. If the court ruled against them, fleeing would mean abandoning everything he'd built here. But watching Sarah tonight, seeing her courage and resilience, Ethan knew he would sacrifice anything to keep her safe. The ranch, his reputation, even his own freedom if necessary. Some battles transcended personal cost. This was one of them. The following week passed in tense preparation. Ethan increased security around the ranch, positioning experienced hands at strategic points and establishing regular patrols. Cooper visited daily, bringing news from town and the territorial capital, most of it discouraging. Western Mining had intensified its campaign, both legal and extra-legal. Their lawyers had filed additional motions questioning Ethan's mental stability and financial capacity. Meanwhile, their hired guns maintained a visible presence in Redemption Springs, intimidating potential witnesses. They're creating a narrative, Cooper explained one evening, painting you as an unstable war veteran while presenting themselves as respectable businessmen. It's working too, Dr. Levy added grimly. I've heard people in town, good people who know better, repeating their talking points. Perhaps the girl would be better off with a proper family, they say, as if a corporate guardianship is more natural than living with her blood relative. The shift in public opinion was frustrating. Despite Carter's exposed corruption, many still viewed Western mining as a source of prosperity. Against this coordinated assault, Ethan and his allies seemed increasingly outmatched. Their most compelling evidence, Mary's diary, was being systematically undermined by Western Mining's lawyers, who questioned its authenticity and Mary's credibility. We need something more, Ethan insisted, something they can't dismiss. I've been thinking about that, Cooper replied thoughtfully. Carter must have kept records of his dealings with Western Mining, business correspondence, contracts. Presumably in his office at the courthouse, Dr. Levy pointed out, which is now locked and guarded by men loyal to the company. Not necessarily, Cooper countered. Carter was paranoid. He wouldn't have kept his most incriminating documents where others might find them. His home, then, Ethan considered. That private cabin where he took Sarah after the battle here. Cooper nodded. Worth investigating at least. If we could find proof of Western Mining's direct involvement in illegal operations, not just through Carter, it might be enough to sway Judge Harrison. The plan was risky. The cabin was a day's ride away, in territory now actively patrolled by Western Mining men. I'll go, Ethan decided. Tonight. Not alone, Cooper insisted. I'm coming with you. 2 sets of eyes will search more efficiently, and 2 guns offer better protection. Ethan wanted to refuse, but the marshal's determined expression brooked no argument. They would go together, slipping away after dark when Sarah and the other children were asleep. As they worked, Sarah entered the study, her expression troubled. There's a man watching the ranch, she reported quietly. From the ridge above the north pasture, I saw his telescope reflecting the sun. Cooper and Ethan exchanged concerned glances. The north ridge offered a clear view of the ranch house, perfect for surveillance. "You did exactly right," Ethan assured her after she explained. "Always trust your instincts." Cooper was already at the window, positioning himself to view the ridge. "He's still there," he confirmed grimly. "One of Western's men, likely. Professional work. They're probably watching all approaches to the ranch." The discovery complicated their plan. If the ranch was under surveillance, any departure would be noted. "We need a diversion," Ethan decided. Sarah, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "I could help. I'm small. They don't watch me as carefully." "Absolutely not," Ethan responded immediately. "It's too dangerous." "I didn't mean anything dangerous," Sarah clarified. "But Eleanor was planning to take us children on a picnic tomorrow by the East Creek. If we went and made it obvious, wouldn't they watch us instead? Because I'm who they're interested in." The logic was sound, though Ethan hated involving Sarah. Cooper, however, nodded thoughtfully. It could work. A daylight activity completely innocent but requiring enough attention from their watchers to create a window of opportunity. "I don't like using Sarah as bait," Ethan objected. "Not bait," Sarah corrected with surprising firmness. "A distraction. There's a difference. And I'd have Eleanor and Tom protecting us. We'd be fine." Once again, Ethan was struck by Sarah's maturity. "All right," he conceded reluctantly, "but you stay close to Eleanor at all times, and Tom will have extra men with you, armed but discreet." "I promise," Sarah said solemnly. With Sarah's unexpected contribution, their plan took final shape. Ethan and Cooper would depart after midnight, using the southern ravine to conceal their exit. Meanwhile, life at the ranch would continue normally, with Eleanor's picnic serving as misdirection. As Sarah left to help Martha with dinner, Cooper watched her go with admiration. "Remarkable child," he commented. "She thinks like a tactician twice her age." "She's had to," Ethan replied, a mixture of pride and sadness in his voice. "Survival required it." "Let's ensure her future demands less of such skills," Cooper said quietly, "and more of normal childhood joys." Ethan nodded in firm agreement. "That's precisely why we're doing this." Midnight found Ethan in the stable, quietly saddling his most reliable mount. Cooper was doing likewise with a borrowed horse. The night was cloudy but dry, with just enough moonlight filtering through to illuminate their work without revealing them to distant watchers. "Ready?" Cooper whispered, securing his rifle in its scabbard. Ethan nodded, performing a final check of his own weapons. They led their horses on foot until they were well away from the main buildings, using a shallow drainage ditch to conceal their movement. Only when they reached the mouth of the southern ravine did they mount up. The ravine wound through rocky terrain for nearly 2 miles. Throughout the passage, both men remained vigilant, but the night remained quiet. "I think we're clear," Cooper murmured as they emerged. No signs of pursuit. Ethan wasn't so easily reassured. They might have riders positioned further out. "Possibly," Cooper acknowledged, "but not likely in this direction. The ravine is too easily overlooked." They continued on through the night, Cooper's knowledge of the territory proving invaluable. By dawn, they had covered nearly 15 miles. They paused briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold breakfast. "Another 4 hours should bring us to Carter's cabin," Cooper estimated, consulting a rough map. "Assuming it's still standing after the fire," Ethan added grimly, "and assuming Western Mining hasn't already searched it thoroughly." Cooper shrugged. "Possible, but not certain. The cabin's location was known to very few. Carter valued his privacy for his more unsavory activities. Mid-morning found them approaching their destination with increased caution. From a vantage point on a rocky outcrop, they could see the cabin had indeed survived the fire, though one wall and a portion of the roof had collapsed. More concerning was the presence of 2 horses tethered near the front porch. "Company," Cooper whispered, raising his field glasses. 2 men armed. By their dress, not locals. Probably Western Mining hired guns." Ethan frowned. "Searching the cabin?" "Guarding it, more likely," Cooper corrected. "See how they're positioned? One watching the trail, one by the door. They're not there to find something. They're ensuring no one else does." The observation confirmed their suspicions. Carter had kept incriminating documents in the cabin, and Western Mining was determined to prevent their discovery. Options? Ethan asked quietly. Cooper considered. Two of them. Two of us. But a direct confrontation risks injury, and we need to return. I could create a diversion. He paused, his expression changing. Wait. Look at their horses. Ethan followed his gaze, noting the distinctive Western Mining brand on one mount. Company men, definitely. What of it? Not just company men, Cooper corrected. I recognize that bay. It belongs to Jackson, Maxwell's former deputy, who sided with Carter. Took a bullet in the shoulder during our last discussion. The identification changed the dynamic. Jackson wasn't just a hired gun. He was a former lawman with a personal grudge. He'll recognize us on sight, Ethan noted. No, Cooper agreed. But he's also arrogant and likely still nursing that wounded shoulder. The marshal's expression hardened. I have an idea, but you won't like it. I'm listening. I ride down openly. Marshal on official business. Draw their full attention. Jackson won't be able to resist the opportunity to confront me. While I keep them occupied, you circle behind the cabin. And if they decide to simply shoot the marshal? Ethan asked grimly. Unlikely. Jackson's smart enough to know that killing a federal officer would bring more heat than even Western Mining could handle. He'll posture, threaten, delay, but not open fire. At least, not immediately. Cooper's confidence was steady. I can handle Jackson long enough for you to find what we need. Ethan disliked the risks, but couldn't devise a better alternative. Time was their enemy. 30 minutes, he decided. If I haven't found anything by then, or if there's any sign of trouble, I'm coming out, guns ready. Cooper nodded. Look for hidden compartments, false walls or floorboards. Carter was paranoid. They separated, Cooper descending directly toward the cabin while Ethan worked his way around to the rear. From his position, Ethan could see Cooper ride openly into view, raising his hand in greeting as the two guards immediately drew their weapons. Marshal Cooper, Jackson's voice carried clearly. Quite a coincidence finding you in these remote parts. No coincidence, Jackson, Cooper replied, dismounting with deliberate casualness. Following up on reports of suspicious activity, these are territorial lands, not private property. As Cooper had predicted, Jackson couldn't resist engaging. You've exceeded your jurisdiction, Marshal. This area falls under Western Mining's development claims. Interesting interpretation of territorial law, Cooper responded, his tone deliberately provocative. Care to show me the documentation for that claim? The verbal sparring continued as Ethan reached the back of the cabin, finding a partially collapsed wall that offered easy access. He slipped inside, drawing his revolver as a precaution. The interior was smaller than he'd expected, the fire damage significant but not total. Working quickly, Ethan began his search. The obvious hiding places yielded nothing. As minutes ticked by, his frustration mounted. There had to be something here. The answer came as he glanced at the stone fireplace. Unlike the wooden walls, it had survived the fire intact. Kneeling beside the hearth, he examined the stonework. The craftsmanship was surprisingly sophisticated. He ran his fingers along the stones, pressing experimentally. On the third stone from the right, something shifted. Applying more pressure, he felt the stone move inward, revealing a small hidden drawer. Inside lay a leather portfolio, its edges singed but its contents intact. Ethan withdrew it carefully, opening the cover. The portfolio contained exactly what they had hoped for. Letters on Western Mining letterhead, contracts bearing corporate seals, and detailed instructions for concealing worker deaths and avoiding inspections. Many documents bore the signatures of not just Carter, but senior company executives, providing direct evidence of corporate complicity. His discovery secure, Ethan prepared to exit when a sharp crack from outside, a gunshot, froze him in place. Cooper's voice rose in an angry warning, followed by Jackson's taunting reply. The confrontation was escalating. Abandoning stealth, Ethan moved to the front of the cabin, positioning himself where he could see through a gap in the damaged wall. Outside, Cooper stood with his back to a tree, his right hand hovering near his holster. Opposite him, Jackson and his companion had spread out, both with weapons drawn. "Last chance, Cooper," Jackson was saying. "Ride out now and forget you were ever here. The company doesn't want a dead marshal complicating matters." "Generous," Cooper replied sarcastically. "But I think I'll complete my inspection first, unless you gentlemen have something to hide." Jackson's patience visibly thinned. "We don't need this, Cooper. The hearing's already decided. Judge Harrison is in the company's pocket. Morgan will lose the girl, lose his ranch, lose everything. Why die for a lost cause?" The casual confidence with which Jackson declared the outcome of the hearing sent a chill through Ethan. Was the fix truly so complete? "Because some principles matter more than winning," Cooper answered steadily. "Something you wouldn't understand, Jackson." The former deputy's face contorted with rage. "Principles won't save you or Morgan's brat. The company always wins." His hand tightened on his revolver, and Ethan knew with certainty that Jackson intended to kill Cooper, regardless of the consequences. In that same moment, Cooper must have reached the same conclusion. His hand dropped to his holster with practiced speed. The next few seconds unfolded with the terrible clarity of violence. Jackson fired first, his bullet splintering the tree bark inches from Cooper's head. Cooper's return shot was more accurate, catching Jackson in his already wounded shoulder and spinning him to the ground. Jackson's companion panicked, firing wildly toward Cooper while retreating. Cooper took cover, returning fire with controlled precision. Ethan seized the opportunity, emerging from the cabin with his Winchester raised. "Drop it," he commanded. Jackson's partner froze in surprise. For a moment, it seemed the man might comply. Then Jackson, writhing on the ground, shouted, "Shoot him, Daniels! It's Morgan!" Daniels swung his weapon toward Ethan, forcing him to dive for cover as bullets splintered the doorframe. Rolling to a protected position, Ethan returned fire, his first shot missing, but his second finding its mark in Daniels's thigh. The man cried out, dropping his weapon and collapsing. Cooper emerged from his cover, his revolver trained on both men. "It's over, Jackson," the marshal declared. "You're both under arrest for assaulting a federal officer." But Jackson wasn't finished. With the desperate strength of a cornered predator, he lunged for his fallen weapon, raising it toward Cooper with murder in his eyes. Ethan and Cooper fired simultaneously. Jackson jerked violently as both bullets found their target, then slumped motionless. His final expression one of shocked disbelief. Daniels, witnessing his partner's death, immediately raised his hands in surrender. "Don't shoot! I'm done!" The sudden silence following the gunfire seemed unnaturally heavy. "You hit?" Ethan asked Cooper. The marshal shook his head. "Clean. You?" "Same." Ethan nodded toward the interior of the cabin. "I found what we needed. Letters, contracts, direct evidence of corporate involvement." A grim smile crossed Cooper's face. Then Jackson died for nothing. His decided hearing just became considerably less certain. While Cooper secured Daniels and treated his leg wound, Ethan retrieved their horses and examined the documents. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. "We need to get these to the Capitol immediately," Ethan decided, "before the company realizes what we've found." Cooper nodded. "I'll take them personally, along with our prisoner. His testimony will add weight to our case." He glanced at the portfolio. "You should return to the ranch. Sarah will be worried, and Western Mining might react unpredictably once they learn of Jackson's death." The logic was sound, though Ethan was reluctant to separate. "You'll be traveling alone with a prisoner. Risky." "I'll take the high trail through Thunder Canyon," Cooper replied. "Less traveled, and I know it well. Besides, they'll be looking for two riders, not a marshal with a prisoner." The plan made sense, despite Ethan's reservations. Cooper was right. His place was at the ranch. 30 minutes, he decided. If I haven't found anything by then, or if there's any sign of trouble, I'm coming out, guns ready. As they prepared to part ways, Cooper placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We've got them now, old friend. These documents prove systemic corruption, not just Carter's individual crimes. Even a judge in the company's pocket will have difficulty dismissing such evidence." Ethan nodded, hoping his friend was right. But Jackson's confident assertion still haunted him. Be careful, he urged Cooper. The closer we get to victory, the more dangerous they become. Cooper mounted, Daniel secured uncomfortably on a second horse. 2 days to the capital, 1 day for the legal filings. I'll return as soon as possible. He paused, his expression grave. If I'm not back by the hearing date, assume something went wrong. Be prepared to take Sarah and run. The frank acknowledgement of the risks sobered Ethan. I'll be ready, he promised. Either way. As Cooper departed, Ethan gathered Jackson's body and began the long journey back to Triple M Ranch. The spring sunshine illuminated the landscape, but Ethan found little joy in it. Would Cooper's dangerous mission make any difference? As Triple M appeared in the distance late that afternoon, he still had no answers. But seeing Sarah waiting anxiously on the porch, her small figure straightening with relief at his approach, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened at the hearing, he would not allow them to take her. The next week passed in a haze of preparation and growing tension. With Cooper gone and the hearing date looming, Ethan divided his attention between strengthening the ranch's defenses and preparing contingency plans. Tom Wilson organized regular patrols, while Eleanor instructed the children on emergency procedures. What might have seemed excessive felt grimly necessary. Sarah threw herself into these preparations with characteristic determination. She memorized escape routes, practiced riding at night, and insisted on basic shooting lessons. Watching her methodically load and unload a small derringer, her small hands steady, Ethan felt a complex mixture of pride and sorrow. No child should need such skills. "Do you think Marshal Cooper made it to the capital?" she asked on the evening of the 5th day. "I believe so," Ethan replied, though uncertainty gnawed at him. They had received no word. "He knows those trails better than anyone." Sarah nodded. "And the papers he took, they'll help us?" "They should," Ethan confirmed. "They provide direct evidence of Western Mining's illegal activities." Sarah considered this, absently stroking the small calico kitten that had adopted her. "Uncle Ethan," she said after a pause, "if we have to leave, what happens to Josiah and the others? And Martha and Eleanor and Dr. Levy?" The question revealed her deepest concern. Not for herself, but for the makeshift family that had formed around them. Ethan had been making arrangements for this, though he'd hesitated to share the details. "They'll be taken care of," he assured her. "Tom has agreed to manage the ranch. Eleanor and Dr. Levy would come with us, at least initially. The other children." He hesitated. "Cooper has arranged potential homes with trustworthy families in the Eastern Territory, far from Western Mining's influence." Sarah's face fell. "We'd be split up, but we promised to stay together, especially Josiah. He still has nightmares. I help him." The concern in her voice made Ethan's chest tighten. "It would only be temporary," he promised, though he couldn't be certain. "Until we establish ourselves somewhere new and can send for them." Sarah didn't appear convinced, but nodded reluctantly. "I understand. It's like when Mama and Aunt Rebecca were separated. Sometimes staying together is too dangerous." The mature acceptance in her voice broke Ethan's heart. "Sarah," he said gently, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens with the hearing, I will not let them take you. Even if we have to leave everything behind, we'll remain together. I promise." She studied his face, then smiled, a rare, unreserved expression. "I know," she said simply. "That's why I'm not afraid anymore." The implicit trust humbled him. As darkness settled, Ethan remained on the porch, scanning the horizon for any sign of Cooper's return. The marshal's continued absence fueled his growing concern. Dr. Levy joined him. "No word?" he asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "Nothing." The doctor sighed. "We should consider the possibility that Cooper was intercepted." "I've considered it," Ethan acknowledged grimly, "which is why I've already set the evacuation plans in motion." "When is the hearing?" 3 days from now, though without Cooper and the evidence." Ethan left the sentence unfinished. "You could still attend," Dr. Levy suggested. "Present your case directly." Ethan had considered this but rejected it as too risky. The hearing is likely a trap. They expect me to appear, leaving Sarah vulnerable here. So, you forfeit the legal battle entirely? The battle was likely lost before it began, Ethan replied, recalling Jackson's confident assertion. Our only real chance was the evidence Cooper carried. Dr. Levy contemplated this. Where will you go, if it comes to flight? West, Ethan replied. Oregon, then perhaps California. Cooper arranged contacts along the route. A dangerous journey, especially with a child. Less dangerous than remaining here if Western Mining secures legal authority to take her, Ethan countered. I've seen what happens to children in their operations, Levy. I'll die before I let that happen to Sarah. The doctor nodded. When do we leave? The question, so simply posed, caught Ethan by surprise. We? Did you think I would abandon you now? Dr. Levy asked with gentle reproach. After everything? Besides, a child needs medical care during a difficult journey. The unexpected loyalty nearly overcame Ethan. It won't be comfortable, Levy. The elderly doctor chuckled softly. My dear boy, I crossed the continent in a wagon with nothing but a medical bag. Discomfort and I are old acquaintances. The simple declaration reminded Ethan that he wasn't alone. We leave tomorrow night, he decided. After sunset. Whether Cooper returns or not, we can't risk waiting. The following day passed in careful, quiet preparation. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds gathered, promising a storm that would mask their departure. As evening approached, Tom Wilson entered, his expression grave. Riders approaching from the east, he reported, at least 6, moving fast despite the rain. Western mining men, Ethan concluded. The timing was too deliberate. Cooper. They must have intercepted him. They're 20 minutes out at most, Tom warned, and they don't look like they're coming for polite conversation. Ethan made an instant decision. We leave now. Tom, delay them as long as you can. Tom nodded, his weathered face determined. We'll give you at least an hour's head start. The children will be protected as if they were my own. Ethan clasped his foreman's hand. He turned to Sarah, Eleanor, and Dr. Levy. Gather your things. We ride in 5 minutes. Out the back way, through the eastern ravine. But the riders are coming from the east, Eleanor objected. Exactly, Ethan explained. They'll expect us to flee west. By circling east behind them, then cutting north toward Thunder Canyon, we can avoid their main force. While Tom organized a defense, Ethan led their small party to the stables where 4 horses stood ready. With a final glance at the ranch house, he led them into the gathering storm, leaving behind everything he had built for something infinitely more precious. The rain provided welcome cover as they made their way through the eastern ravine. They had covered perhaps 2 miles when the distant crack of gunfire reached them. They're buying us time, he told the others grimly. We need to make the most of it. By midnight, they had reached the northern approach to Thunder Canyon. Ethan called a brief halt. Sarah huddled close, soaked and shivering, but uttered no complaint. How much farther to the safe house? She asked through chattering teeth. Another 4 hours if the rain holds, Ethan replied. Dr. Levy approached, his face etched with concern. The gray is showing signs of lameness, he reported. She likely won't make it through the canyon without rest. The development complicated their situation. I could stay behind, Eleanor offered immediately. Ethan shook his head. Too dangerous. Eleanor could ride double with me for short stretches, Dr. Levy suggested. Slower, but we'd stay together. They settled on the latter plan. As they prepared to continue, a sudden sound brought them to alert stillness, horses moving at speed despite the storm. Pursuit, Ethan concluded grimly. How in this weather? Eleanor whispered. Trackers, Sarah answered softly. Miss Cordelia used them to find children who ran away, men who could follow trails others couldn't see. Change of plans, Ethan decided quickly. We need to split up. He outlined his revised strategy. Dr. Levy, you and Eleanor continue toward Thunder Canyon. Sarah and I will head west through Blackwater Gorge. It's narrower, more dangerous, but more difficult to track. A diversion, Dr. Levy realized. You're drawing pursuit away from us. They want Sarah, Ethan confirmed. If they spot our trail diverging, they'll follow us. But Blackwater Gorge is treacherous, Eleanor protested. The flash flood risk. We'll be careful, Ethan interrupted. The important thing is reaching Cooper's contact in Silver Springs. If we're not there in 3 days, continue without us. Sarah, listening intently, spoke up. I should go with Dr. Levy and Eleanor. The suggestion caught Ethan by surprise. Why? Because they'll follow you, not them, she explained with simple logic. You're who they expect to have me. If I go with Dr. Levy while you leave obvious tracks, they'll follow the wrong trail. The strategy showed remarkable insight, but Ethan hesitated. It's too risky. If they somehow found... It's our best chance, Sarah insisted. And I'm not afraid. Dr. Levy and Eleanor will protect me. Dr. Levy placed a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder. The child is right, Ethan. Strategically, this offers the highest probability of success. After a moment, Ethan reluctantly nodded. 3 days, he told Dr. Levy, his voice tight. Silver Springs. The contact is Thomas Whitfield, former Union cavalry. He has a smithy on the north edge of town. We'll be there, Dr. Levy promised. Ethan knelt before Sarah. You listen to them. Do exactly as they say. Trust no one we don't know, Sarah recited. Stay hidden. Use the signal whistle if there's danger. Her composure threatened to undo him. I'll find you, he promised fiercely. No matter what happens, remember that. Sarah nodded, her blue eyes steady. I know you will. Like Mama found Aunt Rebecca, even when it was hard. Ethan deliberately left obvious signs of passage heading west, while Dr. Levy, Eleanor, and Sarah departed north. Watching them disappear into the rainy darkness, Ethan experienced a moment of pure, primal fear. Then, hardening his heart, he mounted and rode west. By dawn, the rain had slackened. Ethan paused, listening for pursuit. The forest was eerily silent, but he harbored no illusions. Mid-morning brought confirmation. A flash of color, the faint jingle of tack. Pursuers, maintaining distance. He continued at a steady pace, occasionally leaving additional evidence of Sarah's supposed presence. A small footprint, a hair ribbon snagged on a bush. By midday, the chase intensified. His followers abandoned subtlety for speed, forcing Ethan to push his mount harder. Late afternoon found him approaching Blackwater Gorge, a narrow canyon carved by centuries of runoff. With the recent rains, it represented a deadly gamble. He had no intention of entering, planning instead to leave obvious signs of entry, then backtrack to a game trail leading north. As he approached the gorge, a disturbing sight stopped him cold. Fresh tracks in the mud, multiple horses heading into the canyon, and among them, the smaller prints of a pony, similar to Sarah's. Dr. Levy, Eleanor, and Sarah. But why would they come this way? Something must have gone catastrophically wrong. Without hesitation, Ethan urged his tired horse forward, into the gorge. The gorge closed around him like a trap. The trail hugged the canyon wall, occasionally disappearing beneath standing pools. The tracks told a troubling story of difficult passage. He had progressed perhaps a mile when a sound reached him that transformed concern into terror. The distinctive roar of approaching water. A flash flood. Ethan spurred his exhausted mount forward, abandoning caution for speed. He rounded a sharp bend and nearly collided with them. Dr. Levy and Eleanor were struggling to coax their frightened horses up a steep side cut in the canyon wall. Sarah was attempting to follow with her reluctant pony. No time! He shouted above the growing roar. The water's coming! Get to higher ground! The side cut offered their only chance, but it was steep and slippery. Dismounting, Ethan practically dragged Sarah's pony up the initial slope while Sarah scrambled ahead. Dr. Levy and Eleanor followed. The roar crescendoed, and Ethan glanced back to see a solid wall of churning brown water filling the gorge. With a final, desperate effort, they reached a ledge just as the torrent surged beneath them. Ethan pulled Sarah close, sheltering her as the flood claimed the path they had just navigated. Within moments, all evidence of their presence was obliterated. When the initial surge subsided, Ethan turned to Dr. Levy. "Why did you come this way?" The doctor's expression was grim. "Western Mining had men watching the northern approach. We nearly rode straight into them. We had no choice." "What about you?" Sarah asked. "Were they following you?" "Yes," he confirmed. "But that's a good thing now. They'll assume we've all been caught in the flood. It might buy us valuable time." The realization brought a measure of hope. Their pursuers would likely focus on the gorge's western exit, waiting for survivors who would never emerge. "Can we make it to Silver Springs from here?" Dr. Levy asked. Ethan considered their situation. Their horses were exhausted, supplies limited. "We can," he decided firmly. "It will take an extra day, perhaps two, but the gorge has given us an unexpected advantage. Dead men can't be hunted." As they prepared to continue, Sarah approached him. "I knew you'd find us," she said simply. "Even when Dr. Levy was worried, I told him you'd come." The simple faith humbled him. "I will always find you," he promised, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "No matter what." Silver Springs emerged from the misty landscape on their third day. A small settlement nestled in a valley, it represented both sanctuary and risk. They camped a mile outside while Ethan ventured ahead to locate Thomas Whitfield. The smithy stood at the northern edge of town, smoke curling from its chimney. A powerfully built man in his 50s emerged, a familiar Union Army insignia tattooed on his forearm. "Looking for Thomas Whitfield," Ethan said, using Cooper's phrase. "I hear he shoes horses that can outrun the devil himself." Recognition dawned. "James Cooper said you might come," Whitfield confirmed quietly. "Said you'd have a child with you, and trouble on your heels." "The child and two others are waiting," Ethan said. "As for trouble, we may have lost it, but I don't expect that to last. Best bring them in after dark. I've got rooms prepared." He lowered his voice. "You should know, Cooper never reached the capital. Word came 2 days ago. He was found dead on the trail. Ambushed." The confirmation of Ethan's worst fears hit like a physical blow. Cooper, his oldest friend, was gone. "And the documents he was carrying?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Missing," Whitfield confirmed grimly, "along with his prisoner." The hearing proceeded as scheduled yesterday. Judge Harrison ruled in Western Mining's favor. Full corporate guardianship of Sarah Collins, with authorization to employ all necessary means to secure her return. Whitfield's expression darkened. "There's a substantial reward, $5,000. Their situation had deteriorated from precarious to impossible. We can't stay long," Ethan decided. "A day to rest and resupply, then we continue west." Whitfield nodded. "Wise. Silver Springs has remained independent, but money speaks loudly." He hesitated. "I received a telegram from another of our regiment brothers in Sacramento. He's arranged passage on a ship from San Francisco to Seattle, then on to Alaska Territory. About as far from Western Mining's reach as possible." Alaska, a frozen wilderness. It was desperate and inspired. "How soon can the ship depart?" Ethan asked. 2 weeks from now. Time enough to reach San Francisco if you travel steadily." Whitfield paused. "It would mean a complete break with your past. New identities, new lives." The implications were sobering, erasing Ethan Morgan entirely. Yet weighed against Sarah's safety, the sacrifice seemed small. "We'll do it," he decided, "whatever it takes." That evening, they slipped into Silver Springs, finding sanctuary above the smithy. While the others retired, Ethan remained awake, discussing arrangements with Whitfield. Their host had already begun preparations, supplies, a guide, documents for their new identities. "Thomas Morgan and daughter Elizabeth," Whitfield suggested, showing Ethan the papers. "Recently widowed, seeking a fresh start. Dr. Levy becomes his father-in-law, Eleanor, the child's governess. Simple, believable." Ethan nodded, noting with sad amusement how thoroughly Cooper had planned this. "One thing remains," Whitfield said, his expression grave. "Cooper wanted you to have this. He withdrew a small leather satchel. Inside were copies of the documents from Carter's cabin. He made copies before leaving, Whitfield explained. Sent one set with a trusted messenger to the territorial governor. Kept these as insurance. The blacksmith's eyes hardened. Cooper always had contingency plans. Ethan examined the documents. Grief, anger, and hope warred within him. The governor may be as compromised as Harrison, he observed. Perhaps, Whitfield acknowledged. But these copies also went to the War Department in Washington. Cooper had friends there, men who take a dim view of corporate interests assassinating federal marshals. His smile was cold. Western mining may have won this battle, but they've started a war they cannot ultimately win. The knowledge provided some comfort, though Ethan harbored no illusions about immediate justice. By the time any action occurred, they would be long gone. But something fundamental had been preserved. Not just Sarah's safety, but the moral principle Cooper had died for. Dawn found them prepared. As they rode out, Ethan glanced back at the small town, the last outpost of their old life. Beside him, Sarah straightened in her saddle, her gaze fixed resolutely forward. "Ready?" he asked her softly. Sarah nodded, her expression serene. "As long as we're together, I'm not afraid." The simple declaration carried more wisdom than most adults achieved in a lifetime. As they rode west into the rising sun, Ethan realized that in trying to save this remarkable child, he had ultimately been saved himself, rescued from isolation and bitterness. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together. The frontier lay behind them. Ahead stretched a different kind of wilderness, unknown but full of possibility. In protecting Sarah, he had found his own path to redemption. As the mountains rose before them, Sarah began to softly hum a tune Rebecca had taught her. A simple melody of hope and homecoming that bridged past and future in perfect harmony. The song of a journey not ended, but truly just begun. If you enjoyed this story of a family forged in the fires of the frontier, please let us know in the comments what courage means to you. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales of survival, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that define us. Your support helps us bring these stories to light.